Romanian Eagle. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 451, Lviv. 1. The lively martial consignment ceremony, which had a far-reaching influence on the Romanian army, came to an end. The newly promoted two marshals immediately became the focus of national conversation. Different from the people and the government watching the excitement, the conferring of this title has a great impact on the army point, because first of all, the appearance of the marshal not only means that Romania's military rank has been raised by one level, it also represents the deep cultivation of the military's future command system. The marshals who are only rewarded after the war for merit are very likely to appear in the wartime command system in the future point. But no matter how eager these generals are for marshals, one thing they all know is that Romania cannot be promoted to marshal again in a short period of time. This short period of time refers to within 8 years. Whether it is Admiral Friet, who is only one step away from the marshal, or Major General Hoffman, the youngest general, they all know it. The reason is very simple. After the war, it is necessary to hurry up to develop new territories and integrate them into the Romanian economic system. With the guidance of education and public opinion, these new territories can be better integrated. People are selfish, and when the economic ties are too close, who will talk about independence? A person who is selfless in pursuit of independence, whether it is now or in the future, is a character who will be featured in the book. And they forgot to praise it, because it is rare, and who would pursue this kind of news if it was a common situation? At present, Romania is developing close economic ties with the new territory, and as an economic driver, banks certainly need to be a step ahead. In Lviv, an important city and transportation hub in the Galicia region, a newly opened Romanian industrial and commercial bank stands on the street named after its founder, Grand Duke Danin Galicki. Galicki Street is the center of Lviv's economic activities. Not only banks created by locals, but also many foreign banks can be seen here. There are more than a dozen banks standing on this street. It's no surprise that locals privately refer to Galicki Street as Bank Street. As a commercial and economic center, Lviv is also on the main route to the ports of the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea from Kyiv, Central and Eastern Europe. Its favorable geographical location promotes economic development. Its natural environment has also attracted many other people, including Tatars, Germans, Hungarians, Poles, Lithuanians, Austrians and so on. Other ethnic groups also brought their own culture, arts, traditions, and religions to Lviv. The unique conditions enable Lviv to focus on the rich historical accumulation of Central and Western European countries. It is therefore not surprising that Lviv's architecture is a mixture of Gothic and Baroque, Renaissance, and Romanesque. That's why it's also called Little Europe. People from all over the world brought their local religions, so there are many churches here. In the city square, there are Romanian Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant and other churches in a circle. In addition, Lviv State University, founded in 1661, is also one of the oldest universities in Europe. Rich religious beliefs and educational institutions, coupled with convenient transportation, the standard of living of the locals in Lviv is also quite good. So wanting the rich Lviv to return to Romania is also a test for the rulers of Bucharest. For the newly appointed Lviv Mayor Dovlich, this is not only a test, but also his own ladder. Dovlich is a Ukrainian who was born and raised in western Ukraine, and he was one of the main figures in the faction of former Ukrainian Prime Minister Morakov. After Morakov went to Kyiv to become Prime Minister, he stayed behind to operate the region in western Ukraine. And the ability is good, operating the western Ukraine region as their base camp. Later, after Romania merged with the Ukrainian government, Morakov and Nikol, as well as the former President Gorbachev, the Speaker of the Parliament Mikhail and others were all transferred to Bucharest to hold positions, and of course he will not be forgotten by Romania, being appointed mayor of Wallif. However, Doveric knows that the reason why he can be appointed as the mayor of the city is rewarded, and whether he can continue to gain room for improvement in the Romanian political system depends entirely on his ability and performance point. And according to his knowledge, no political figures in the new Romanian territory are currently serving there, and they are basically transferred to different regions. And he can be transferred from western Ukraine to Lviv and Galicia, which is somewhat of an advantage. After all, there are Ukrainians. Although they are still different, they are still preferential treatment point. In fact, the eastern Galicia region currently represented by Valiv is very different from western Ukraine. One was previously under the jurisdiction of Austria-Hungary and the other was under the jurisdiction of Russia. Although there are Ukrainians living on both sides, there are still a large number of Poles in eastern Galicia. Under its influence, the Ukrainians in Galicia are not very different in customs and habits from the locals in western Ukraine who were influenced by Russia. Doveric knew it before he came to be mayor, not to mention the Romanian laws, regulations and administrative styles that need to be implemented in the two places now, and the month before Doveric took office, he was busy with the various problems caused by it. Fortunately, the government knows that forcible suppression is not a good outcome, so the Romanian bank, which controls the economy, took the lead in coming to Lviv to carry out economic activities as the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, which is backed by the royal family. It is not surprising that the mayor of Doveric appeared on the scene. Of course, local leaders in Lviv will not ignore the background of ICBC, and they also appear here together. So this also led to the opening scene of the Lviv branch of ICBC, which was comparable to the gathering of local dignitaries, and other people who didn't know the truth were surprised. Thank you, Your Excellency the Mayor and all of you, for the successful opening of ICBC in Lviv. Our ICBC is the largest commercial bank in Romania, and has enough strength to escort the economic development of Lviv. To support the development of local industry and commerce, our bank has launched 1-year, 3-year, and 5-year industrial and commercial support loans with interest rates of 4.25%, 5.45%, and 6.75%. The head of the branch, Wiriachi Jr., was at the door of the branch announcing the new measures of ICBC to everyone. Little Wiriachi's words caused everyone present to take a deep breath. This interest rate is really very low. The current prevailing bank lending rates in Lviv are 5.75-6.25% for 1 year, 6.95-7.65% for 3 years, and the 9th of May 10.25% for 5 years. This is simply equivalent to giving profits to the local people. No matter what they do, they will make more profits than they can. Little Wiriachi looked like a busy bank door in an instant. In my heart, I admired this move made by my old father. This was specially formulated by his father, who was the president, not only to cooperate with the government's penetration of the local economy, but also to work hard for the bank's own expansion. Otherwise, why can ICBC be firmly seated as the #1 commercial bank in Romania? In addition to the royal family behind it, the efforts of the father are also inseparable. And it's not just a branch in Lviv that offers such conditions. Currently, all industrial and commercial banks in Romania will launch such preferential policies. It's just that little Wiriachi used his own advantages and announced it 2 days in advance, which would facilitate him to gain a firm foothold in Lviv. Chapter 452, Lviv, Part 2. President Wiriachi, ICBC's move has benefited the people of Lviv a lot. As the mayor, I would like to express my gratitude to you. Mayor Doveric seized this opportunity to express his gratitude to ICBC for this move in front of the public. Mr. Mayor is all about the Romanian government's concern for the people, and our bank is just following the government's footsteps. Faced with the mayor's praise, of course, President Wiriachi won't say that it was ICBC's own decision. Instead, he brought the government along, saying it was a good deed by the government. Anyway, this kind of thing is to gain real benefits for oneself. So why not do it for the government's reputation? So under the leadership of President Wiriachi Jr., the people present praise the government's concern for the people of Lviv, making people who don't know the truth think how much these people love the Romanian government. Of course, little Wiriachi is not a loss. Lviv is the core city and transportation hub of Eastern Galicia. The financial environment here is better than most parts of the country. Except for the Bucharest branch and the Constanta branch, it is the best place here. Prospects. Otherwise, his father would not have transferred him here to increase his qualifications. Of course, he himself is very capable, otherwise he would not be able to seize the opportunity given to you. The bustling opening ceremony passed quickly, and the industrial and commercial support loan business given by the Industry and Commerce. Many people present were moved. Even if they didn't come to handle the business, they could have other people in the family come. This was not a problem for them. So in the following time, President Wiriachi received business cards from many people. President Wiriachi, I'm the little Magli from the Magli family in the east of the city. This is my business card. Our family's main industry is the production of textiles. I may trouble you next. I hope you don't mind. The well-dressed little Magri handed his business card to the little Wiriachi with both hands, and also took this opportunity to introduce himself. The Magri family. Of course I know. I knew your name when I was at the head office. When I was in Austria-Hungary, your family's textiles were sold all over the world. For an excellent company like yours, it is really good to take care of our bank. Grateful. Yesterday, in Little Wiriachi, who was familiar with the local family information in Lviv, he boasted that the other party took the business card and put it into his already somewhat thick pocket. I didn't expect that the name of our company would be passed into your ears. Today, I mainly came here to say congratulations, so I didn't bring any business. I'll invite you to my house alone the other day, and I hope the president will not refuse. Sure. After the little Wiriash sent the little Magli away, immediately another guest came to him, and he immediately greeted him with a smile. On this day, ICBC Lviv branch negotiated a lot of business. Among them, the total amount of intentional deposits amounted to 7.8 million lei, and the loan amounted to 15.72 million lei. In just one day, Wiriachi became famous in Lviv and gave ICBC a firm foothold. As the mayor of Lviv, Dovrich did not stay here, but returned to the city government after attending the opening ceremony. However, before he left, he found President Wiriachi Jr. and told him that he had important matters to discuss with the city government tomorrow. The next morning, President Wiriachi came to the city hall. After a briefing, Mayor Dovrich personally welcomed him into his office. Please take a seat, Captain Wiriachi. Seeing the overly polite Mr. Mayor, little Wiriachi could basically guess that this man must be asking for help. But he didn't ask. Instead he sat down. After the secretary brought the coffee, Mayor Dovrich opened a clip. Mr. Wiriachi, what do you think of Lviv? After taking a sip of coffee, Wiriachi answered the mayor's question. Lviv is a very good commercial city. Goods from all over the world can be found here with convenient transportation. And the area is also very rich in products, which is a rare good place. After listening to the words of little Wiriach, Mayor Dovrich sighed and said, yes, that's right. There is a railway from Poland to Kyiv, as well as a line extending from Bucharest to here, which can be said to be transportation. Very convenient. You can take the train from here, no matter which direction you go. After talking about the advantages of transportation, Dovlicki changed his style of painting. However, because of the reason that the two countries belonged to the two countries, the railway line became irregular. Take the railway from Kyiv to Warsaw, because it belonged to the two countries before. There are two countries, so there is a need to transfer trains between standard and Russian-made rails. This is how the huge transfer workshops outside the city arise, which is a huge waste for the transportation of goods and people, and it is not conducive to circulation. So your excellency the mayor wants to change the Russian-made railway gauge to the general railway gauge in Romania. Little Wiriachi finished what Mayor Dovrich wanted to say for him. Yes, that's what I think. As long as this way, the goods can be transported directly to various places without changing vehicles, which is very convenient. Mayor Dovrich immediately admitted and said what was in his heart. Then can I ask, how much is your renovation budget, and how much is approved by the Ministry of Communications? Little Wiriachi immediately asked the crucial question. He knew that, since Mayor Dovrich told himself, this matter must have been approved by the Ministry of Transportation, and most of the matter has been discussed with the neighboring cities and counties. so you just need to ask how much it is. We have calculated that the cost of the renovation is 24 million lei. The Ministry of Communications promised to bear half of the cost, and the other costs will be raised by our cities and counties along the waypoint. After listening to the words of Mayor Dovrik, Little Wiriaki thought for a while, and felt that there are not many Russian-made railways in Lviv. As for the need to find a bank loan, so he asked curiously, "So, you are transforming the railway lines in your own jurisdiction?" Little Wiriachi's inquiry made Mayor Dovrik say a little embarrassedly, "It's not this way, but all the railway costs that need to be transformed are counted together, and the cities and counties share the cost according to their wealth." No wonder after hearing the words of Mayor Dovrik, Little Wiriash finally knew why the mayor needed to ask him for a loan. Who can be richer than Lviv and the cities and counties along the way? So in terms of expenses, Lviv must also make a big deal. Of course, as a mayor, it is impossible to be as careless as a businessman, and Lviv is the most profitable for the transformation of the railway. He doesn't have a big head. Who comes out? Some of the Little Wiriachi who understood it continued to ask, "So how many gaps do you have now?" 5 million lei. What? Hearing the numbers reported by Mayor Dovrik, Little Wiriachi couldn't help but scream. It's not that he has little knowledge. He can take out even a one-time loan of tens of millions of lei, as long as your collateral has such a high value. Government loans are the toughest of all banks, often with delinquencies and bad debts, and they are commercial banks, rather than policy banks that need to be self-sufficient and profitable institutions. If they opened their own mouths and local governments came to ICBC for such loans, then they would be able to make profits and go bankrupt. Don't take the big four as European commercial banks, Your Excellency the Mayor. The amount you mentioned is too large for me to decide. In the face of the numbers reported by Mayor Dovrik, President Wiriachi Jr. refused on the spot. We can use the proceeds of the railway as collateral. And you can think about it, President Wiriachi. Regarding the reaction of President Wiriachi Jr., Mayor Dovrik did not give up, but stated his own plan. Mayor Dovrik, this is not something I can decide. And with all due respect, the income of your railway can't be used as a mortgage at all. There are too many irresistible factors. The only thing that can be used as a mortgage is fiscal revenue. President Wiriachi stopped drinking coffee. This cup of coffee was too expensive for him as a bank branch manager. He stood up and said the best way he could think of at the moment. President Wiriachi, you should think about it again. Mayor Dovrik still resisted taking the city government's financial revenue as collateral and couldn't help but continue to test. Sorry. President Wiriachi was not used to the mayor. He pushed open the door and walked out. As for the terms of the loan, Wiriachi Jr. doesn't think any bank will accept it, and the conditions he put forward are the most generous. If a bank really agrees to the mayor's conditions, then it's too late for him to be happy. And an event that happened shortly after made Little Wiriachi sometimes feel that God's will was difficult and he was being tricked by God. Chapter 453 Sokol Coal Mine. In the wild hills north of Lviv, a group of sweaty teams marched with mules and horses in the fields of early spring. People can walk sweating profusely, and it seems that their journey is not short. Judging by the sturdy thick cloth they wore, and the wear and tear on their skin, and their thick, reddish skin, these people must have been out in the wild a lot. The mules and horses dragged a lot of instruments, such as turning planes, shovels, rulers, shovels, tents and other tools. Judging from these equipment, they were a geological exploration team. They are exploring northern Lviv. After crossing a river, a member of the front of the team walked to the middle and started a conversation with a middle-aged man and his is Captain Darlov. The guide said that the C3 area marked on the map is the C3 area marked on the map. As long as the sampling survey is completed here, we only have the last C5 area further north. And our exploration work is about to end already. It's almost here. Let everyone work harder and try to set up camp there as soon as possible. I want to go back to a comfortable bed early. At least there are no animals to disturb your rest. Captain Dalev asked everyone to speed up, and by the way, he encouraged everyone's fighting spirit. Under the urging of the captain, the members of the exploration team involuntarily accelerated their pace. Yes, it is the wish of everyone in the exploration team to go home early after work. Even Darlov, who has been in this business for nearly 20 years in the eyes of outsiders. The exploration team is a noble and hard work. They climbed mountains and waded waters and walked in various regions, searching for resources buried in the ground in the mountains and fields, providing sufficient power for Romania's economic development. In Doloff's view, hard work can be said to be nobility, and the pains and sorrows of climbing mountains and waters throughout the year are not enough to tell outsiders. What makes it even more uncomfortable is that when doing geological exploration all year round, there are basically all kinds of problems, such as arthritis and stomach problems, which exist in almost everyone. Especially after retirement, the torture is very uncomfortable. Several of his previous captains needed help from others because of various root causes, but fortunately, this time I was only exploring hilly areas, such as the Carpathian Mountains, which were basically all over, and many of these areas can be said to have a very harsh living environment. After going over this low hillside, a barren mountain range appeared in front of them, and there was not even a hunter's hut. Bring the guide here. You can find a place to settle down first, and we will explore the area after a rest. Dalev, the captain, immediately instructed the players, so under his guidance, the team members immediately found Illywood Col to build a temporary camp. And the guide they invited, a local hunter named Lelfo, walked up to him. "Captain, look for me." "Yes, Lilf." Dalev pointed to the mountain in front of him and asked him, "Have you been here as a hunter?" "I have tracked prey before." "Is there any vegetation in this area that is different from other areas?" "There's a reason." Dalev asks this too, because there are many mining areas that have variations in vegetation. For example, if there is iron ore in this area, then the plants that grow well should be iron-loving plants, such as alfalfa, sativa, arborvitae, foxtail, sand cypress, and other plants will grow very lush than other areas. And if there are copper ore resources in this area, then plants such as nulauke and broadleaf fragrance will appear in a large area. This is also the basic knowledge of their exploration team, which initially determines whether there are minerals in the area from the distribution of plants. However, there are still many minerals that do not have obvious plant markers, which requires them to collect samples from the area for analysis. I didn't see any difference between plants here and other places. In the face of Dalev's question, the hunter Realfo clucked his head for a long time and couldn't come up with a difference. "Okay, thank you, Lelfo." Dalev didn't get discouraged if he didn't get a clue from the guide, which was the Norman exploration work. On the contrary, the mineral resources with obvious associated plants are really rare. After so many years of investigation, he has only obtained clues from the local population. Once it was a small village called Lurocco in the Carpathian Mountains, and it was known from the local population that the iron ores growing there were quite lush. Antimangi is a gold mine companion plant, and he really found a small gold mine there, for which he and his team members also received a reward of 10,000 lei. The exploration team works in the field all year round, so they set up temporary camps very quickly. They unloaded the equipment and built the tents in a short period of time. After all, it is only a place for temporary rest, so there is no need to be too particular about it. And when the construction was much worse, Dalev immediately assigned tasks to everyone. Cheza, Komen, Diana, the three of you look east first. Emil, Jarrau, Hull, look north. Hull, Albin and me, go west. Look, the others are grooming at camp. The team members who were assigned to the task responded one after another. "Okay, Captain." After Dolph assigned the task, he took a compass, shovel, and rope and followed Hull and Albin, and chose the east side to move forward. He wanted to explore the area around the camp. While it was still early, the area has always been deserted, making it difficult for the three of them to move forward. Along the way, they tried to choose areas with less vegetation. After coming to an open field, Dalev looked at the exposed geological rock formations around and said, "Look at the exposed rock formations over there. It looks like Carboniferous. Let's go and see if we find anything." Okay. The two immediately followed in the captain's footsteps. The coal mines currently owned by Romania are all from the Carboniferous period, so they plan to take a look at the Carboniferous geology first. There needs to be more to say here. The current famous coal mines in the Ruhr area come from the Permian strata, and the coal mines in Shanxi in later generations also come from the Carboniferous strata. The three came to the rock formation, picked up their shovels, and started digging. To put it simply, geological exploration is to choose a place and dig it out to see if there are minerals. Of course, this is a joke. Among them, the division of labor in the exploration work is very detailed, and many tasks require the cooperation of instruments, and they are only planning to check the geological structure of the area at first glance. The three of them worked in the field all year round, and soon dug a pit more than 1 meter deep. Team member Hull looked at the geological structure and said, "Captain, it seems that the geological structure of this area is no different from other places it seems so." Dolph also stopped and looked. How about we stop and try somewhere else? In the face of the team's inquiries, Dolph thought for a while and said, "If you don't dig another half a meter to take a look, the pit is only over 1 meter, and you won't find anything." Alright. Then the three people began to dig. Seeing that the sun was about to drop to the edge of the mountain, the exploration work was about to end. Halev digs the shovel down, and he plans to call it a day. At present, there seems to be no difference. At this moment, the shovel brought out some black particles. Watlef reached out his shovel and picked up one of the black particles and looked at it. It's coal. Years of geological exploration work made him recognize coal at a glance. Let's dig down to see what kind of coal this is. The coal particles found did not attract much attention to Dolph because basically he could find coal when he probed everywhere. However, most of them are lean coals and lean coals that have no mining value. These coals are not only of poor quality, but also generally less than half a meter in coal seams, which are completely useless. With the excavation of the three people, the coal here gradually revealed its true colors. This is hard, dense and high-gloss anthracite, and in the subsequent days of continuous excavation, they found that the thickness of the coal seam here is also quite good, generally between 2 to 4 meters, and the area is not small. Then they reported to their superiors that C3 had discovered a coal mine with large reserves. The lack of coal and iron has always plagued Romania. Now that an anthracite coal mine is discovered, the government immediately sends a larger exploration team. They carry the most advanced instruments to conduct detailed exploration of the area. It was eventually discovered that the area was a large coal mine. The total stock reached 5.3 billion tons, of which 1.8 billion tons were convenient for open pit mining, including 2.12 billion tons of anthracite, 1.82 billion tons of bituminous coal, and 1.38 billion tons of lignite. They will report to Bucharest, the place where the coal mine was found. A small village named Sokol recently is the name of the coal mine. The transportation needed to mine this coal mine next will be essential, and now Medovich is finally free of money. Chapter 454 Eastern Galicia Heavy Industry Zone 1. And when the news came back to Bucharest, Edicide, Romania's shortage of coal and iron, or has finally been initially resolved. In fact, the exploration of the new territory made the government overjoyed, and a lot of coal, iron, lead, manganese, gold, copper, mineral salt and sulfur minerals were newly discovered in Transylvania. The coal is mainly lignite. The estimated output is around 2.4 million tons, mainly from scattered small coal mines. The iron ore in this area is also dominated by small iron ore with low reserves, but there are good finds in gold, mineral salt and sulfur, with the Kempine gold mine in Alba County being the largest in the region. 179 tons of gold reserves make it the second largest gold mine in Romania. And in the Transcarpathians, Edel is delighted by the newly discovered oil resources in the region. Although it has the same sulfur content as the current Ploiesti oil field, its reserves of up to 150 million tons allow Romania to become an important oil producer in Europe in the next 2 or 3 decades. The area with the most resources detected so far is Eastern Galicia. The Sokol coal mine was discovered in Lviv. A considerable amount of manganese was found in Ternopil adjacent to it, and in Ferenchovsk, near the Transcarpathian Mountains. Iron manganese, minerals such as nickel and aluminum, among which iron ore has several moderate reserves of rich ore. It makes Romania, which has always lacked coal and iron, a lot of peace of mind. At least the steel industry can be said to be finally free from others, so after these resources were discovered, the government immediately prepared to start development. Among them, Eastern Galicia, which has the most abundant resources. The government intends to make it the first heavy industry base in Romania. Although it is not comparable to the industrial base of Donetsk-Kharkov, which has not yet shown a large scale, it is not comparable to the Czech Republic, which has just independently obtained the heavy industrial base of Austria-Hungary and Bohemia. Shoes are not worthy, but this is at least the first heavy industry base built in Romania. Point in the Prime Minister's office. A meeting on the construction of a heavy industrial zone is being held here, and various high-level government officials are here to discuss the investment in the heavy industrial zone. Point the resources we have discovered in our newly recovered land are very rich. The coal, iron, manganese and other mineral reserves found in Eastern Galicia are not small, and they can be built into our heavy industrial area. Due to the scarcity of iron resources, the steel produced in my country mainly comes from Constanta, and the raw materials of the Constanta steel plant are all shipped from abroad. In the previous war, the steel plant was always in the stage of shortage of raw materials, which also led to the output of steel. Insufficient, has a great impact on our economic development. Moreover, the output of steel represents the development of heavy industry and national strength. Needless to say, the United States and Germany have no possibility to compare the annual output of tens of millions of tons. Britain, France, Russia, and Austria-Hungary all produce thousands or millions of tons. Even Italy, which is lagging behind, also produces millions of tons of steel. We only have 400,000 tons of production, which doesn't match our identity at all, and it doesn't give full play to the role that the steel industry plays in the economy. At present, many of our factories and enterprises need to import the steel from abroad, which not only increases their costs, but also reduces their competitiveness. In the long run, the damage to the Romanian economy is also increasing. Therefore, we must have our own heavy industry base, which can better promote economic development. The Minister of Industry, Karacsony, talked about the benefits of establishing a heavy industrial zone in Eastern Galicia at the meeting. The attendees were listening carefully to his speech and taking notes from time to time. After he spoke, the Minister of Education, Florica, opened his mouth and asked, "Your Excellency, Karacsony is wrong. We do need such a heavy industry base. So what plans does the industrial sector have for building this heavy industry base?" When asked by the Minister of Education, Karacsony spoke about the plans made by the industrial sector. "We plan to build a large coal iron complex in Lviv, and we require a steel production scale of 500,000 within 3 years, a steel output of 800,000 within 5 years, and 1.8 million tons within 10 years. Relying on this steel enterprise, we will also build machinery, energy, chemical, materials and other enterprises in Ternopil and Ferencváros, which can meet domestic needs in the short term, sell to other countries in the medium term, and sell in the world in the long term. We have our products everywhere." Karacsony speaks out of the ambitious plans his department has come up with. The other ministers present here broke into a cold sweat. It's not that the plan is bad, it's just too good. This involves the big issue of Romania's financial distribution. After all, the government's fiscal revenue is only so much, and if it is given here, it will be less in other places. Sure enough, after Karacsony finished talking about the Ministry of Industry's plan, Florica, the education minister who currently occupies the most money in government departments, couldn't sit still. "Your Excellency Karacsony, how much money do you need for this plan?" "We calculated that it will take 2.5-3 billion lei, $5-600 million, to build it in 10 years. It will only require 250 to 300 million lei per year, which will not take up too much a lot of money." It appears that Karacsony also knew that the plan would require too much money. However, he put an ambush here, only talking about the average annual cost, not saying that most of the cost needs to be invested in the first 3 years. Because the initial investment in heavy industry is very large, the procurement of major facilities and equipment, road paving, and personnel recruitment need to be carried out from the beginning. This plan is good, but it needs to spend too much money, which has not considered private capital. I think it is completely possible to raise funds from the private sector for this plan, and the government only needs to be responsible for major steel companies and road construction, and then give private funds to the private sector. Some policy support for enterprises is a good thing for the government and the private sector. Sure enough, after Caraccioli stated the required fee, there was an immediate opposition. This is not an explicit objection, but the current mainstream solution. To promote this heavy industry plan to the private sector, the government only needs to invest in key enterprises. Caraccioli saw that the speaker was the Minister of Education, Florica, who asked the question earlier. He murmured in his heart, do those who engage in education still do industry? Then he bluntly refuted the other party's remarks. Mr. Florica, the plan you mentioned is currently not suitable for the domestic situation. This plan requires strong private capital, and Romania's current private capital is completely insufficient to do this. Florica reluctantly continued to mention, then it is completely possible to let them invest together. If one person is not strong enough, he can find several people, and we can give them certain support in policy and finance. I think someone did this. There is a point here that I need to state in advance. This heavy industrial zone is to provide a boost to the Romanian economy, so it will not be too profitable. Point in the face of Florica's repeated speeches and objections, Caraccioli directly stated the biggest disadvantage of this plan to private individuals. Without heavy industry with high profits and huge upfront investment, Bunsen is not very attractive to private capital, unless it cedes its pricing power to the market. Point it needs to be mentioned here that there are mainly two types of heavy industry construction. One is like the United States, which is completely pushed to the market, and even the pricing power is pushed to the market. The power rests with the government. Of these two schemes, the first one is completely useless in Romania, and the second one is Caraccioli's idea. Chapter 455 Eastern Galicia Heavy Industry Zone, Part 2. Such a plan would put too much pressure on the government's finances, which would require cutting spending in other sectors. When Florica was unable to speak when asked by Caraccioli, Chancellor Albert spoke out about the biggest problem with his plan. Yes, others may dare to say such things, and only the Chancellor of the Exchequer dares to say so. I saw, he continued, according to the current estimates of the Ministry of Finance, the revenue for the next fiscal year should be 2.6 billion lei. This seems to be good enough to meet the plan that Caraccioli said. But the account can't be calculated like this. There are too many places where Romania needs to spend money. Military spending accounts for 31%, and other public expenditure such as scientific research, education, and medical care account for a relatively high proportion. In addition to spending on new territories, in fact, Romania's fiscal expenditure has already exceeded its income. We can issue government construction bonds, which can help us raise capital up front. In the face of financial opposition from the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Caraccioli can only use the methods he can think of. It's issuing bonds again. Don't you know that there are enough bonds issued by the government at present? In the face of Caraccioli's words, Chancellor Albert felt a surge of anger welling up in his heart. He has his own reasons for saying this, with 800 million lei issued in government bonds alone this year, and Chancellor Albert is already devastated. He has told the Prime Minister more than once that Romania's finances have reached a warning line, and the scale of debt cannot be expanded. Moreover, the current domestic financial situation is not very good, and the sales of government bonds are not high. In foreign countries, sales are not bad in New York, and Romanian bonds in London and Paris are not well sold. This is not to say that 800 million lei government bonds are difficult for his chancellor, but the current size of Romanian government bonds has reached 7.6 billion lei, of which more than half are long-term bonds of more than 10 years. Among these bonds, the long-term bonds from around 1910 have entered the stage of centralized exchange, so this is the main reason for Romania's current financial constraints and the source of his troubles. Seeing that almost everyone opposed Caraccioli's plan, Brătianu, the Prime Minister, had to speak up at this time. Is there really no other way financially to deal with this funding? The Treasury is really out of money at the moment, unless the size of the army is reduced, and the equipment purchased for Germany is reduced. Chancellor Albert's words left the Prime Minister feeling a little powerless. It would be unfortunate for anyone to mention the method of reducing military spending, not to mention the current ups and downs in Eastern Europe and the newly acquired territories. The military, who has only been promoted to 2 marshals, is currently in high spirits, and it is enough to face the anger of the military. This proposal can only be abandoned. As for the second proposal, it is even more confusing. Because this is a project that King Edel personally caught, it is not easy to get money from the king. However, thanks to Edel's sensibleness, as long as you can persuade His Majesty to get support, it is easier than deducting money from some military leaders. But even if the Chancellor of the Exchequer gave to conditions, Prime Minister Bricianu wanted to see if there was any other way. Is there any other way, such as continuing to issue bonds? We can give higher interest rates in the face of the Prime Minister's inquiry. Albert, who was in charge of the purse, immediately complained, "Your Excellency, the interest rate of the bonds we issued abroad is already high enough. The 10-year bond yield has reached an annual interest rate of 6.27%. It is already very high among countries. At present, our bonds in the bond market are close to saturation, and if interest rates are raised again, the pressure on the government will be very great. We must ensure that we will not be run down by mature debts in the future." The Chancellor's remarks gave the Prime Minister some headaches, as he supported Karachuya's plan. As the Prime Minister of a country, he can see the role of Karachuya's plan for Romania in the future, which is why he supports this plan. The words of the Chancellor of the Exchequer made the Prime Minister really embarrassed. He knew that many people in the government were peeping at the yellow river in His Majesty's hand. It's not that he doesn't want the gold in the king's hands, but he also wants to take out the rest. It's just that the money is too difficult to pay, and he is deeply opposed to it. The last time I could get money was because it was mainly due to the war. It was related to the triple interests of the military, the government, and His Majesty, so it was so easy to get money from the king. And now it is very difficult to get this money from His Majesty, just because of the juggernaut heavy industrial zone, which makes the Prime Minister's head daunting. For this reason, he had to ask Karachuya, can this plan be smaller in scale? At present, other government expenses are too large and cannot be reduced. Make a plan that is easy to pass first, and then take it slowly when the finances are abundant. Expansion. Seeing that the Prime Minister was also talking about downsizing, Karachuya cried out in grievance, "Prime Minister, at present this plan is the best for the economy and national strength, and many projects cannot be moved at all. These are closely related industries, such as oil exploration and chemical industry, steel smelting and equipment manufacturing. And even if the scale is reduced, the investment is also the role is small. For example, infrastructure such as roads, hydropower, etc. It is impossible to reduce the funds invested in the early stage. In addition, the scale is small, and the ratio of investment and income in the future will be quite uneconomical. Moreover, the investment of these funds is also very beneficial to the stability of the local area, and will also play a leading role in the long-term stability of Romania in the future." What Karachuya said gave the Prime Minister even more headaches. It turns out that too many resources are also a problem, with the government completely lacking the funds to develop it. I'll think about it. The Prime Minister, who is difficult to decide, chooses to postpone it in the face of this difficult problem. So the meeting to discuss the construction of the heavy industry zone ended, and all the officials left the venue one after another. Karachuya could only pack up and prepare to go back to his department to discuss again. Your Excellency Karachuya, wait a moment. The Prime Minister was born at this time and stopped him. After only the two of them were left, Prime Minister Bricianu sent out the other staff before saying, "Karachuya, there is one thing I want to tell you alone. Please speak, Your Excellency. In this year's election, I want to resign as party chairman." Karachuya, who was completely unprepared, was shocked on the spot, and he couldn't help but say, "Why?" During Bricianu's 10 years as Prime Minister, the internal Romanian economy has grown substantially, and its size has nearly tripled. Negotiate a huge new territory for Romania. Although there are various other reasons for these credits, no one can ignore the role he played in them. Even now newspapers refer to him as Romania's greatest statesman, and Karachuya's previous peeps at the Prime Minister's position have faded away over time. It can be said that, as long as he runs for election this time, the prime ministership cannot escape his grasp. It's mainly because I'm a little tired and want to let go of this responsibility. Facing the prime minister's rhetoric, Caraccioli did not believe it at all. As a politician, there must be other reasons for not wanting to be prime minister again, but he won't keep asking. So he can only continue. If you feel tired, then you can take a long vacation. Listening to Caraccioli's comforting words, Brescian, you can also say, okay, take a vacation when you are free. But I say it is true. I have been busy with government affairs all these years, and I haven't been with my family for a long time. Yes, I feel a little indebted. The conversation between the two came to an end, but the desire for the prime minister's position resurfaced in Caraccioli. I can't figure out why the prime minister would say such a thing, but someone must be able to. Chapter 456 Eastern Galicia Heavy Industry Zone, Part 2. The situation, you said, is likely to be his true thoughts. Giulia, who was lying on the rattan chair, was analyzing Bresciano's true state of mind to his nephew Caraccioli. Caraccioli, who got the news from Bresciano that he did not want to continue to be the prime minister, rushed to his uncle's house overnight to inform the old fox in politics of the news he had just received, and his uncle's words made him feel a little puzzled. But there's no reason. He has such a high reputation now, and there is absolutely no one in the country who can shake his status. Can he really want to accompany his family? Seeing that his nephew still didn't understand, Giulia gave him an analysis. How is this possible? If you are with your family, just listen to it. You can't take it seriously. According to my analysis of his character, he doesn't want to continue doing it. The reason is most likely our strong majesty. Giulia's analysis made Caraccioli suddenly realize. Uncle, you are saying that his majesty is too strong. It makes him feel unhappy with the position of prime minister. Yes, don't forget that this prime minister is the nephew of Jan Constantine Bresciano. Of course his uncle was the founder of the Liberal Party, and he was trained by his uncle since he was a child, and his political affairs are also smooth sailing. Of course, his ability is also very good, otherwise it would be impossible to serve as prime minister from 1910 to today. And generally people with outstanding ability have their own ideas, but don't forget the prime minister's familiarity with and respect for British and French politics. Caraccioli's eyes lit up when he heard the uncle's clear words. So Our Excellency Bresciano, after being prime minister for 10 years, found that his political ideas could not be applied in Romania at all. Therefore, he was arrogant and did not want to continue doing it. Giulia listened to his nephew's analysis, nodded and replied, there may be other reasons, but this is definitely his main reason. In fact, the old prime minister Giulia analyzed it well. There are other reasons why Bresciano does not want to continue to be prime minister. But Romanian politics is also becoming more like a monarchy, which is definitely the main factor. If it is said that Romania has gained the most famous new territory this time, Bresciano is not in the top 3. The second and third are the Romanian militaries Marshal Pretian and General Ploiesti. The two generals who have made great achievements for Romania have completely led the trend in the country. Now the power of the domestic military has risen sharply, and everyone has a good impression of the army that has expanded the country's territory. Many people regard the two generals as the patron saint of Romania. From the number of people who plan to apply for the military academy this year, it can be seen that the public supports the military. The number of people who apply for the military school this year has reached 31-1, so that the difficulty of applying for the military school has become the most difficult school. And the most famous is King Edel. Most of the people attribute Romania's current strength to the leadership of His Majesty. From the beginning of domestic industrialization to the choice of the Balkan Wars, of course, it is the first battle on the team. This His Majesty chose exactly what was best for Romania. As for the subsequent occupation of Eastern Galicia and the annexation of Western Ukraine, his keen insight into the situation can also be fully seen. Therefore, Edel's prestige in the country is now completely unmatched, so that Bresciano, who was inspired to bring Western European political ideas to Romania, was disheartened and planned to retire from the position of prime minister. Therefore, after his uncle analyzed Bresciano's intention to retire from the position of Prime Minister. Karachuri felt a little moved, and he told me about it alone to push me out, to run for the Prime Minister's office. Yes. Is there a better candidate in the Liberal Party than you? Karachuri analyzes the candidates in the Liberal Party, and no one else can become his obstruction. The ability is stronger than his own, and he can be more favored by His Majesty without himself. And more favored than themselves. Lack of sufficient prestige in the government. Not to mention that he still has his uncle behind his back, plus he had no credit or hard work when he was Prime Minister. The Liberal Party really has no more suitable candidate than himself. I'm going to run for the premiership. Thinking of this, his heart was a little hot. But you have to think clearly about your own ideas and capabilities in governing. If you need to govern, what plan will you use to implement your ideas at this time? His uncle pulled him back from his greed for the Prime Minister's post. Sure enough, there is an old man in the family who has a treasure, not to mention the old man who was the Prime Minister facing his uncle's words. Karachuri said after careful consideration, at present, Romania needs to turn its energy to developing the domestic economy, which I'm good at. As for diplomacy and other aspects, it is necessary to ask His Majesty's opinion. It seems that Karachuri is self-aware and knows what he is not good at, and he intends to follow His Majesty's instructions on these issues. Some people may say that doing so is simply reducing the power of the Prime Minister, but these people are completely standing and talking without back pain. At present, between the Romanian monarchy and the Prime Minister, it is obvious that the former occupies an absolute advantage, and if there is an advantage, there is a disadvantage. Politics is the art of mutual compromise, and it is understandable to cede some rights to the king for this reason. Seeing that his nephew is very clear about the current political situation, he also has his own thoughts in his heart. So Stulia finally said, it seems that you have a very good understanding of what the Prime Minister needs to do next, so I won't say more. But the plan you drafted to establish a heavy industrial zone must be implemented quickly. This can completely become the last thing to do as Minister of Industry is to discuss with the Prime Minister more. After all, he has no worries about retiring himself. He can do more work in this regard. After all, Our Majesty is also a reasonable person. The old fox is worthy of being an old fox. He is almost 80 years old and still has such foresight. And his words made Karachula's eyes bright, and it was completely feasible to package his plan as a remuneration for the Prime Minister's retirement. And even if the promoter of this plan is changed to His Excellency the Prime Minister, the person who can execute it will be himself, which will benefit him a lot in the future. Not to mention that this plan has a great effect on Romania. I believe Your Majesty will definitely see the benefits. Karachuri did what he said. He left his uncle's house that night and rushed to the Prime Minister's house immediately. After a secret talk between the two, the Prime Minister rushed to the palace with this plan early in the morning. In the palace, after a secret discussion between the Prime Minister and His Majesty, Karachula's plan was approved. Finally, the plan to build a heavy industrial zone in eastern Galicia will be funded by the royal family issuing domestic bonds. The total investment of the whole plan reached 3.1 billion lei, of which 2.8 billion lei was raised. The major domestic banks are the bond issuance contractors. As expected, these long-term bonds are not easy to sell in China, as the Chancellor of the Exchequer Albert said, but fortunately someone took over among them. The Industrial and Commercial Bank of China ate 80% of the bonds, which also led to an extreme shortage of funds for the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China. Fortunately, the situation was gradually eased with the endorsement of the royal family, but in the subsequent development of Romania, the development of other businesses of ICBC was much lower than that of other banks. After eating these bonds, the royal family's funds have been almost completely emptied, and the next step is to look at the government's role in promoting economic development. Chapter 457 The Transformation of Hawk 1. When the government announced the development plan for Eastern Galicia, it caused quite a stir. Many people smelled business opportunities from it, and Hawker Selder in Constanta was one of them. As a smuggler who made a lot of profits by relying on the government in the war, Hawker Sard is now in the shipping industry. The ships under its name reach 13, with a total tonnage of about 100,000 tons. Of course, this tonnage is not famous in the world, but with the addition of the ships of his friends and partners, he has gradually revealed his reputation in the world shipping industry, and now the ships running the Black Sea have not heard of his name. It's just that the Black Sea route is not among the mainstream routes in the world, but its proportion is also increasing year by year. In the near future, when Romania's economy develops, it is believed that there will be more ships running the Black Sea route, and his reputation will be resounding throughout the shipping industry. But now Hawksard is struggling with an annoyance that the shipping industry faces a sharp drop in orders following the end of the war. It is true that after the war, the shipping volume of various countries did not decrease too much immediately, but a large number of transport ships belonging to the government were pushed to the market. This time, in the face of the surge of merchant ships, the order appears to be insufficient. As a problem faced by the entire industry, Hawk is of course not immune. No. After seeing that the various shipping companies were in trouble, Hawk immediately held a meeting to discuss a way out for everyone under the current difficult circumstances. So on Rayford Street, where his shipping company was located, all kinds of luxurious vehicles converged here. As the host, Hawk introduced friends and partners one by one at the door. Most of these people are well-known figures in the Romanian shipping industry. Their combined energy is enough to affect Romanian shipping. Everyone. The main reason for bringing everyone together this time, I believe everyone can guess. That is, the current shipping competition is too fierce and business is difficult to do, and we must find a way out for this. After gathering the people together, Hawksall took the lead in stating the purpose of the gathering. And his words immediately resonated with everyone present, and everyone immediately poured out their own suffering. Yeah, business is too difficult to do now. That's right. Many of my previous orders were robbed by the Anglo-French shipping companies that poured in. Damn, I asked later, and the price was 20% lower than mine. Isn't this a plan to do business at a loss? Isn't that true? Many of me have been robbed by these foreign shipping companies. 2 ships are now empty, and the crew members are now without a living. You guys are not bad. I wanted to take this opportunity to expand the size of the fleet, and bought 3 new ships. Who would have thought that my old customer, the steel mills, cancelled my order, saying that my freight was too high, and now the fleet almost stopped. If there are no more orders, my crew will run out. Everyone was talking about their predicament. No matter how well dressed they are, there are drivers who drive luxury cars when they go out, but no one has hundreds or thousands of people to eat with them. There are not enough orders to make a profit, and anyone can be eaten and bankrupt. Hawk has been listening to their complaints, and after they finished speaking, he said, in fact, everyone's situation is similar. The only difference may be that some people have a slightly better life, and some people have a worse life. But Ask Me said that the current slump in shipping will not be able to improve in a short period of time. When Hawk said this, someone couldn't help but interrupted him and asked why. Hawk, who was in quiet, took out a document he had already prepared and said, "This is the information I paid for the investigation, which is the current reserve of existing merchant ships, the annual shipping orders, and mainstream shipping prices." Everyone immediately focused their attention on the information in his hand, and after seeing everyone's thoughts, Hawk immediately took out many copies of the same information. "If you are interested, take it and study it. It is a small favor for my friends." When Hawk's voice fell, his friends and partners were welcome, and they all picked up the information in their hands and looked at them. In fact, some people have entrusted others to investigate, but there is no detailed investigation by the Hokto people. It not only writes the tonnage of ships of various shipping companies, but also the annual throughput of major ports, and even estimates the next few years' growth in shipping orders and growth in merchant shipping. From these detailed information, it can be seen that Hawk spends more money and energy than others, which can also explain why he is the leader. After everyone had seen it, Hawk said, "Everyone has seen it." After receiving a response, Hawk continued, "Since everyone has seen it, I believe that the most familiar one is the shipping price. Yeah, these foreign shipping companies are really amazing. They can actually do 0.6 lei per ton for 100 kilometers. I will lose for this price point. The same is true for me. 0.7 lei per 100 kilometers per ton is the limit of what I can do. This is when I don't make money. Point. After listening to their speeches, Hawke continued, in fact, our problem is mainly in the management cost. Before the war, because Romania's import and export volume was not large, and the shipping industry was very prosperous at that time, so we were able to. It is interesting to live in it. But now there are too many merchant ships and the transportation volume is greatly reduced. In this case, everyone needs to reduce costs. For example, maintenance costs, and the number of crew members must also be maximized. In addition, fresh keeping and office costs we also have to be extreme. That way we can lower our fees and compete with these foreign shipping companies. In fact, everyone knows what Hawke said, but it is not so easy to really want to cut these expenses. Not to mention the others, they are all familiar people and others have been busy for the company for more than 10 years. It is reasonable to kick him. Point. From this, we can see the shortcomings of Hawke and others. When facing the downturn in the industry and the competition from foreign modern companies, the various shipping companies linked by family and fellow villagers are slow to adjust and have too much cost pressure. The shipping company that was present didn't start with the running boat. It's just that it was not convenient to care too much about obstacles and reputation before, and now it is not enough to not care about it. Point. Hawke's words told them, but now some of the friendships before facing life and death are completely irrelevant. Otherwise they will die together. Then what are you going to do? We all listen to you. Point. Hearing these two sentences, Hawke calmly said what he thought of. Point. There are two options now. Chapter 458 The Transformation. Hawke, Part 2. One of the ways is to cut costs. Everyone understands the cost of compression and is doing this, but Hawke's cost of compression is somewhat different from them. Point. The cost reduction I'm talking about is different from the previous one. First of all, on our essential insurance, we all talked about it separately before, because we are smaller than those foreign shipping companies, so the discount is not big. And we add up. In fact, the scale is not smaller than them, and it is completely possible to form a group to negotiate, and I believe that a good result will be negotiated. Point. Hawke's words made everyone nod. It's not that no one has thought about this issue before, but there is not a person with enough prestige to organize. At present, there is really no other candidate besides Hawke. Point. In addition, we can actually do it together when it comes to dredging government relations. After all, we are still locals. I believe this will give us a lot of extra points. In fact, it is not only domestic relations that will be discussed in later generations, but also foreign countries. Otherwise, there are so many public relations companies from where, among them, the capital of the American Empire, which has become an industry on the bright side. Point. In Romania, the importance of dredging the relationship to shipping companies is simply indescribable. As far as the priority of use of the dock warehouse is concerned, a group of shipping companies can make a fool of themselves. It's just that compared to the previous proposal, this is not as neat as agreed. So after Hawke's voice fell, the scene was full of discussions. In fact, thinking about it is also the relationship that I spend a lot of energy to maintain. Why should I share the benefits with everyone? In one sentence, who is responsible for my previous expenses? There are various situations in which people suffer from lack of concern and equality, which makes everyone seem less unified in this matter. Hawke had already anticipated this situation, and at this time, it was necessary to see the courage of the leader. I saw him taking the lead in saying, my own relationship can be shared with everyone. As long as we are united, it will not be difficult. Point. As the largest shipping company here, Hawke's own network is also the strongest. After seeing the most powerful Hawke speaking and wanting to share his relationship network, others also said, my relationship can also be shared with everyone. Me too. Yes, and me. Count me in. Everyone's enthusiastic statement made this possible slapstick thing past immediately. From this, we can see how useful an excellent leader is. He can completely resolve a matter that caused a dispute through his personality charm. Of course, Hawke himself will not suffer. Although he has shared his own network, he has also expanded his relationship. Who will not know him, the leader of the shipping industry, in the future? So it's a win-win, but he makes more money than everyone else. After solving another problem, Hawke continued, the next step is the use of the port. I know that everyone has a stake in it more or less. This time I don't need everyone to share it. After all, this relationship, it's a matter of the survival of the respective shipping companies. But we can join forces. No one spoke this time, obviously wanting to hear the solution given, and Hawk certainly had his own thoughts on this. You can give a certain degree of inclination to your shares in each terminal and port without affecting the interests of the other party. For example, everyone present can dock the cargo ship at the wharf under our control and unload the goods to our own warehouse. In terms of price, we should also give a certain discount. I think 15% off is a good discount. Obviously, Hawk is very careful about the wharfs and warehouses that are the core of the shipping companies. He didn't ask for sharing. That's impossible. Instead, it proposes a preferential plan, which can gradually concentrate everyone's business. It can also benefit everyone. Soon his plan got everyone's response. No problem. Hawk's plan is fair. I agree. I agree. I agree. 2. I see that everyone is very supportive of themselves in terms of shipping. Hawk continued to talk about another plan. Thank you for your support. At present, the shipping business is in a downturn, and relying on these measures is believed to help everyone overcome the difficulties. However, it is difficult for us to develop and grow by relying on this method alone. So I'm here. There is an idea, and that is to go ashore. Go ashore. That's right. It's going ashore. Hawk took out the government's plan for the development of Eastern Galicia and said, I don't think we can stay here forever when the industry is in a downturn as a whole, and it will last for many years. Put some money into other industries, making a profit, and nurturing the shipping industry is the key to our growth. You mean to invest in Eastern Galicia? Facing the inquiry, Hawk said seriously. That's right. So what is the investment? We don't know anything but shipping, so is it possible that the investment is too blind? This sentence made everyone else in the room chatted and discussed. That's right, they don't know anything except shipping, so the possibility of losing money in blind investment is very high. Seeing that everyone was reluctant, Hawk could only continue to explain. I made a decision after careful consideration. Everyone knows that coal and iron mines have been discovered in Eastern Galicia, and the country has prepared 3 billion lei. Invest in it, and we can rely on this heavy industrial area to produce some marine equipment nearby. We can use these equipment ourselves, which can save us a repair cost. In addition, when the factory is expanded, we may also produce other equipment, sold to other people for a profit. This is what Hawk really thinks. In his opinion, if they want to continue to grow in the shipping industry, they must find ways from other aspects. If they have been in the shipping industry, it will be difficult for them to continue to expand, because they cannot compete with large companies in terms of capital, and must find another way. At present, manufacturing is the direction of his choice. In order to develop and grow the factory, where this hope is placed, he also deliberately chose to start with marine facilities. When the factory grows, it will expand its profits to its own capital in the shipping industry. At this time, someone asked, how much do you plan to spend in total for this plan? To open a manufacturing plant, the total investment is 10 million lei, but it can be invested in several steps. The first batch of funds requires 5 million. The answer given by Hawk made everyone else hesitant. After all, 10 million lei needed to be invested. Even if it was 5 million lei in the early stage, it was a lot of money. But this time some people choose to believe Hawk. I invest $500,000 lei. Now that someone has spoken, things will be much easier to do next. I cast 250,000 lei. I cast 200,000 lei. I'm 50,000. Many people have invested more or less because of their affection, and finally calculated a total of 2.84 million lei. This is also the performance of Hawk's personality charm. If it was another person, he would have left without a hair after the meeting. Hawk immediately prepared to choose a venue in Lviv. After all, this is the location of the future steel plant, and it is always more convenient to be closer. In fact, there are many pioneers like Hawk in Romania. They use their own vision to take the lead in building enterprises in Eastern Galicia, a hot investment land. According to government statistics, private funds of 80 million lei were invested in the heavy industrial zone that year after the plan was released. Among them, manufacturing is their preferred industry point for those who are slow to respond. After the construction of the heavy industrial zone begins to take shape, the investment cost here has risen a lot, which makes them often lament that they are late. Who can blame this? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 459, Future Layout. 1. Eastern Galicia has become a hotspot for investment, and Edel has also heard of it. But this time the royal family's funds have been emptied, and he can only watch it dryly point at present. The investment in Eastern Galicia is mainly the government's responsibility, and Edel is summoning an ambassador this time point. With the performance of this Romanian war and the rise of national strength, there are more and more embassies in Romania. But most of them are small countries, and this time one country caught his interest. The newly appointed Romanian ambassador of the Republic of China, Xiaomingren, is being summoned by Edel point for the Romanian people. The current image of the Republic of China is to occasionally read in the newspapers that it has a large population and a huge territory, but the people are suffering from endless wars. Because there are too few economic and trade exchanges between the two countries, many news are reprinted by countries such as Britain and France, and they are not familiar with this country point. In the past, the diplomatic affairs between the Republic of China and Romania were handled by the Austro-Hungarian embassy, but Romania was neither a place of study nor economic ties, so there were not many diplomatic affairs. But with the defeat of Germany and the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Romania emerged in the Balkans and Central Europe. To this end, the Biang government divided half of the staff of the Vienna embassy and built the first embassy of the Republic of China in Romania, and Xiaomingren was the first Romanian ambassador. Speaking of this ambassador Xiaomingren, it is also a coincidence. Before, he was the first secretary in Vienna, because he was in charge of foreign affairs of Romania and other Balkans, and since Romania was only one of the small countries of the Balkans at that time, he was in charge of foreign affairs with Romania. Therefore, he has always dealt with Romanian government officials, and he is familiar with the situation in Romania. Point after the war, Romania seized a large area of new territory and became a more important country in Europe. At this time, the Biang government found that it did not have a special embassy to deal with it. Therefore, after searching for diplomatic talents who are familiar with Romania, Xiaomingren, the first-class secretary, came to the attention of the Biang Ministry of Foreign Affairs afterwards. Xiaomingren, who was still a little confused after several grades, was arranged by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be an ambassador to Romania. Of course, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is not asking him to make much contribution to the progress of Romania-China relations. It is better to get familiar with it first. Point as for the opening of the embassy in Romania by the Republic of China, Edel also planned to meet people from his previous homeland on a whim. Point Ambassador Xiao, are you still used to living in Bucharest? Edel looked at Ambassador Xiao, who still couldn't let go in front of him, and asked with concern. Point facing the concern of the Romanian king, Xiaomingren bowed slightly in observance of diplomatic etiquette. He replied, "Thank you, His Majesty, for your concern for me. I'm all well in Bucharest. Your government has helped me a lot, for which I'm very grateful." Point after Xiaomingren answered, he felt a little fortunate in his heart, because the Biang government gave him only 10,000 oceans to open the Bucharest embassy, and this money was obtained by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs with great difficulty. Xiaomingren could not do anything about it. Given the current domestic fragmentation situation, which embassy abroad does not want to find ways to generate revenue by itself? He had lived in Europe for many years. How could he not understand? Point however, there are currently too few economic and trade links between Romania and China, which makes it impossible for Ambassador Xiao's income generating plan to start. Point. But what made him even more uncomfortable was that the high cost of housing and living in Bucharest made the 10,000 yuan of the ocean go unexploited. Not to mention buying a few good clothes and hosting a banquet to deepen the connection with other ambassadors. So Xiaomingren lived very tight these days. Fortunately, the Romanian government gave some help after learning about the dilemma of their embassy, so they could maintain the embassy point. After hearing Xiaomingren's words, Edel continued, Ambassador Xiao, Romania and China have always had a good relationship. We have imported a lot of products from China, such as pig bristles, tongue oil, tungsten ore, raw silk, tea, etc. Hearing Edel's speech, Xiaomingren also politely replied, thank you for Romania's love for our products. However, China imports too few products from my country. For example, Romanian chemical products, automobiles, and processed food products. We can all continue to cooperate. Edel changed the conversation and talked about the current economic and trade issues between the two countries. Speaking of which, Romania's main exports of grain, petrochemicals, and automobiles have been unable to open up roads in China. This is the main factor when competition from North America, US grains, Ford cars, and Mobil oil have left Romania completely without sales in this strange land. For example, last year, the annual trade volume between Romania and China was 34 million lei, of which Romania's imports were close to 30 million lei, while its exports were only 4 million lei. Imports are mainly pig bristles, tongue oil, tungsten ore, raw silk, tea and so on. Exports are mainly weapons. The main reason is actually because of the German weapons used in Romania, and China's obsession with German weapons has led some middlemen to import a lot of weapons and ammunition from Romania. Isn't it funny? In fact, Romania's exports are mainly aimed at neighboring countries, and there is no pressure on foreign trade with China. However, people without farsightedness must have near-term worries. Edel cannot wait until the domestic economy develops too much to find a market for him, let alone the famous economic crisis 10 years later. At present, when you open the world map, you can see that Europe is still the engine of the world's economy. However, each country has its own trade barriers, and it is impossible for Romania to occupy much of it, except for a few surrounding countries. Trade with the USSR, which Edel does not intend to do until the first person eats crabs. Besides, they mainly buy all kinds of factory equipment, which Romania itself needs to import. Africa is a colony of various countries, and it is a dumping ground for its suzerain countries' goods. Even the United States cannot open this market with such a strong power, so I don't think so. And don't think about the Americas. This is an economic colony of the United States, and Romania has no ability to challenge it. In Asia, except for a few independent sovereign states, most of them are colonies. However, among this limited number of countries, China is definitely the top priority for Romania. Even if the war has made life difficult for the people, it has never fallen out of the scope of the world's major economies. Edel clearly wanted a piece of the pie. Chapter 460, Future Layout, Part 2. Facing Edel's question, Ambassador Xiaomingren felt that he didn't know how to answer. The ambassador who just took office is not an economist. I really don't know how to answer this question. So, after thinking about it again and again, he said, it may be that Romania is not well known in the country, while other countries have been operating in the country for many years, and the public has recognized them. Facing the answer given by Ambassador Xiao, Prezhan thought for a while and replied, it is true that Romania was not well known in your country before. However, I believe that with the development of Romania in the future, Romania will definitely be completely in the future. It will make the Chinese people like it. Because we have also grown from a small and weak, and our two countries have no political disputes at all. We have never invaded or oppressed your country. A new friend who has no bad deeds will definitely like your country. Xiaomingren, who was taken aback by what Edel said, immediately replied, Your Majesty, you are right. The relationship between Romania and China will surely reach a new level in the future. He had no idea that Edel would make such an evaluation of Britain, France and other powers. That's right, many European countries now call the wars between Britain and France with China as punishment for ignorant societies. He might be able to use this opportunity to enhance his relationship with the king, and it would also benefit his weight in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. After all, not everyone can be a friend of the monarch of a country, especially if this country is relatively powerful. Thinking of this, Ambassador Xiao felt a little hot in his heart. I didn't expect His Majesty the King to be so sympathetic to China. On behalf of the Biang government, I'm here to thank you for your sincere speech. After hearing Ambassador Xiao's speech, Edel laughed and said, "It's nothing. A country made up of 40 million Chinese people will definitely have its own place in the world in the future. At present, it is only the dawn before darkness. As long as China to restore unity, no one can ignore the strength of your country." After saying that, Edel added a sentence in his heart, "But it will take a long time to complete the real unity, because there is a vicious dog beside you." Thank you very much for your majesty's attention to the Chinese people. We will not forget those countries that really helped us. For Romania, our people will definitely know your country's goodwill. Ambassador Xiao, who has no special ability and can't hear Edel's inner thoughts, is really happy this time. Because there is really little room for evaluating China, especially since this person is still the monarch of a country. At present, the general attitude of European countries towards the ambassadors of the Republic of China is that they are arrogant, and even if they hide it, they are contemptuous of some inferior countries. On this point, Xiao Minggren, who has been working in European embassies, is very clear. After all, Europe is the core of the civilized world, and it is normal to look down on other countries at this time. Edel stated the main purpose of summoning Ambassador Xiao this time. I heard that your country and other countries have study abroad programs. I wonder if this program can be expanded to Romania. Our schools in Romania are no worse than other countries, and we can also provide funds to help those eager students who have crossed the ocean. Yes, Edel is very interested in the current work-study program. I have already traveled to the famous diligent study in France. There is a joke in later generations that studying in the United States is an artist and writer, studying in Germany is an engineer in general, and studying in France is a revolutionary. The most famous class of diligent workers studying in France has traveled, and there are many famous figures in later generations. The long and unspeakable name alone will affect future generations for many years, and Edel intends to push forward the plan to study in Romania this time. This is not only to expand Romania's reputation in China, but also for his own little wish, who made him a Chinese in his previous life. Xiao Minggren was overjoyed to hear that Edel planned to fund his plan to study in Romania. This was a real achievement. He never thought that such a huge pie would fall on his head when he came to Romania. This would not only increase his weight in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but also make him famous in the country. Every student studying in Romania in the future, who cannot think of their own good. I don't know how many students does His Majesty plan to sponsor each year to study abroad. Facing Ambassador Xiao's question, Edel thought for a while and replied, "I plan to sponsor a study abroad program for 200 people each year, and each international student will be given a living allowance of 840 lei per year." Don't think this amount is small. It takes at least 3 years to study abroad, usually 4 years. 1 year preparatory study of language preparation textbooks, 4 years of university life. According to this plan, Edel needs to sponsor nearly $1 million in annual expenses just for living allowances, not counting road expenses and domestic expenses. It is estimated that he needs at least $1.5 million per year. Therefore, the cost of studying abroad in this era is really very high, and it is really not affordable for ordinary people. Even the government cannot afford to study abroad for too many people. This is also the reason why Edel is only now starting the study abroad program. Before Romania was poor, where did the money come from to support others? Even if this country is the motherland of his previous life. Therefore, after hearing the number reported by Edel, His Excellency Ambassador Xiao flushed with excitement. This is really a great credit. Maybe he will be transferred back to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to serve as a deputy minister. But then Edel's words brought him back to reality. I plan to use the money to let Mr. Kunpei of your country take charge of the admissions work. Edel intends to pay the money himself. As far as the current situation of the Republic of China is concerned, if it is handed over to others, there may be something wrong. Money moves people's hearts. He understands this truth. Mr. K was the most famous educator in the Republic of China, and Edel felt that he would be more at ease when the money was in his hands. Hearing that Edel did not intend to give the money directly to the Beijing government, Ambassador Xiao was of course not ready to say anything. After all, it was Romanian money, and he was afraid that the credit would go to waste because of the jurisdiction over the funds. So he immediately said, Principal K has a noble character. He is responsible for managing the money. Our government is very reassured. Later, Ambassador Sheo suggested to Edel the proposal to establish a China-Romania Friendship Association, and Edel also agreed to the proposal to expand Romania's reputation in China. However, this fund is not as high as the study abroad program, which costs 1 million lei every year, mainly to promote Romania's reputation in newspapers and radio, and lay a solid foundation for Romanian products to enter China in the future. Then, in a satisfactory environment for the honored guests, Ambassador Sheo left the palace after saying goodbye to Edel, but he wanted to inform the country of the good news immediately. Principal K, who heard the great news, immediately recruited another group of students to send to Romania. In any case, this kind of study abroad program sponsored by foreign monarchs is also a huge surprise for the impoverished Republic of China. At the same time, the country of Romania has also spread all over the country, and they also have a good impression of Edel, the monarch who sponsored the study. So in the following August, the first batch of students studying in Romania set off from Shanghai. A short 16-year-old student with a strong Sichuan accent was also included in the itinerary because of the Edel study abroad program. He is also curious about this country and intends to go to Romania, which has grown from a weak to a strong country, to learn its way of becoming a strong country. All this is what Edel did not expect. Chapter 461 Volkswagen New Products. In the famous Volkswagen test track, a car was driving at high speed under the watch of a group of people. This unlooked car is different from Volkswagen's flagship T-type car. Its rounded shape is also very different from the angular T-type car. At the same time, it is more metallic, and there is a metal bar in front of the car. In this group of onlookers, Ambrose, the new general manager of Volkswagen, watched the driving situation of the car while whispering to Tuslade, the head of R/U0026T beside him. Ambrose is the second helm of Volkswagen, to replace former general manager Minoba. He graduated from Oxford University and has been engaged in product sales since then. He joined Volkswagen in 1910 and gradually became the deputy general manager. He took over the general manager position after retirement from Minoba. Immediately after taking office, he showed the difference with Minoba. It may be that he has been engaged in sales and is extremely sensitive to the customer's experience. To this end, after he took office, he ordered to entrust the sales points around the country to be responsible for conducting questionnaire surveys on customers. It's mainly about the dissatisfaction with the Model T and the price of the car it can accept. The results of the questionnaire survey will also be fed back soon. Many people report that the Model T car is not good looking and not beautiful, and it is too simple and unsuitable for people with identities to drive. In addition, the vehicle lacks protective devices, and people are easily injured after a car accident, and the ride feel is poor. And Ambrose took the feedback very seriously and immediately ordered the R/U0026D department to prepare a new generation of Volkswagen. It is required to be beautiful and generous, but also to have a certain degree of protection. The reason for him doing so is simple. Volkswagen's position in the European vehicle market is currently under threat. At present, the market share of Volkswagen in Europe is only 42.5%. Products from other European vehicle manufacturers are competing fiercely with Volkswagen. Among them, the war factor has the greatest impact on the public. Because of the closure of the strait, Volkswagen can only pass through Bulgaria and then export, and the high transit fee has pushed up the price of the car. After Bulgaria entered the war, basically Volkswagen's Model T cars could no longer be exported. However, European automakers such as Renault and Fiat are desperately trying to seize the market during this period of empty window. For this reason, Renault has built a new car manufacturing plant in Lyon with a capacity of 30,000 people, while Fiat has also built a 1.5-person factory in Milan. Therefore, after the war, Volkswagen re-entered the market and found that a lot of its market share had been taken away, and it was not enough to rely on the Model T to regain the market. So Ambrose needed a new car that would help Volkswagen regain its place in the market. And this task, of course, only the head of research and development, Tuslade, can meet him. Tuslid is worthy of being the technical director of Europe's first automobile company. After he received the task, he started with aesthetics, abandoning the square head, and the square head of the car uses a lot of arc design concepts. Changing the front of the car to an oval shape looks more beautiful. At the same time, the closed body design is used to allow passengers to have better privacy. The newly developed four-wheel independent suspension device makes the passengers in the car more comfortable. At the same time, in order to avoid the losses caused by the car accident, he also installed a hollow round steel column in front of the car, and also installed a radio in the car. The power plant adopts the latest 90 horsepower 6-cylinder gasoline engine produced by Volkswagen and the Romanian Power Laboratory. This gasoline engine is not too outstanding in horsepower, but it is small in size and low in noise, and works stably. It is very suitable for passenger use of the car. This new model makes use of all the newly developed technologies of Volkswagen. Ambrose looked at the new car that had already run a few laps on the test track, turned to Tuslid beside him and asked, "How are the results of the various tests?" Tuslid stared at the moving car and replied intently, "The vast majority of tests have been carried out, and only a few remain unfinished." Hearing the technical director's words, Ambrose continued, "The research and development work needs to be completed as soon as possible, and we need this new car to open up the market for us. No problem, I will work overtime to arrange personnel testing." Ambrose looked at the new car, thought about it, and said, "After you test it, transfer the technology you can use to the new truck project. Our cargo trucks must also ensure the market." While writing something in the notebook, Tuslid replied, "No problem." Ambrose looked at the new car for a while and then left, needing to coordinate production with the production manager. After the test of the new car is completed, the factory production will be arranged immediately. At present, Ambrose has arranged 3 different models for this new car: the light edition, the regular edition, and the deluxe edition, to meet the needs of different people. These are the little tricks Ambrose learned from selling. Different versions use different configurations. The simple package cancels the radio, and the interior decoration also tries to use cheap products. At the same time, there are subtle differences between the models and others. The normal version is the version currently used by the test car. The deluxe version uses newly developed metallic paint, and the door handles are gold plated, which can be seen from the appearance of this car. The interior decoration of the car also uses a lot of valuable supplies, such as the use of Italian cowhide for the seats, and a large number of precious wood such as Nanmu in the car. Anyway, how to use it luxuriously? Of course, its price is quite extraordinary. At present, the price of the new car is 2,000 lei for the compact version, 3,000 lei for the normal version, and 6,000 lei for the deluxe version. At the same time, on the rear of the car, the light version is engraved with an A1 logo, the regular version is engraved with an M1 logo, and the deluxe version is engraved with an S1 logo. This can basically meet the needs of all levels of vehicle use. It is also Ambrose's plan for the development of future cars. In his view, it will not be possible to rely on a car to meet people's riding needs in the future. The myth of the Model T can't exist anymore. Different classes have different needs for vehicles. Ordinary people only need to use the vehicle, and the price factor is their most important focus. The slightly richer middle class, in addition to passenger use, also has demands for comfort and safety, and is also affordable in terms of price. At the same time, it is also necessary to choose vehicles and to separate them from ordinary people. As for the rich, of course, comfort comes first, and they also need vehicles to show their identity. So even a prototype car needs to be sold separately. However, at present, in order to seize the market, Volkswagen must develop new cars faster, so it can only use the same prototype first, and can only separate them from the details. Ambrose has already planned that, if the new car will sell well, he will immediately develop the new car, and divide it into 2 types, mass-use cars and mid to high-end cars. Next, his ideas need to be verified by the market. Chapter 462 New Volkswagen. The time came to June 1920, and the war was long gone. The wounds suffered in the war have also been quietly healed, and a peaceful life makes the world so beautiful. Dallas thinks so too. As a Frenchman who loves life, Dallas was terrified from the bottom of his heart about that world war. This was not the case before Dallas, who who cheered with his friends when the war broke out, and they finally had a chance to reclaim the humiliation of the Franco-Prussian War. However, after joining the army, Dawes was transferred to the logistics department because of his thin body. He was also indignant and felt unworthy of not being able to fight the Germans on the battlefield. Soon the war was as cruel as he showed. Bohr was dead. He was dead in the battle to retake Lorraine. Then Nobisden also died. He died at the Battle of the Marne. Fudoco is okay. He is not dead, but his legs need to be amputated, and he can only spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. There were also more than a dozen friends who knew themselves, including Bile, Carol, Doles, and Nori. They died and were injured, but in the end, only himself survived the war unscathed. So he got a nickname among friends, Lucky Doles, who worked in the logistics department, also made a fortune in this war. Wrestling materials is something that our logistics departments are well aware of. It's just that most people don't dare to do it. But who made Dawes meet a good boss? So during the war, Dawes and his superiors worked hard to help those hungry people, no matter where they came from. They both treated these people with a kind heart and only needed to pay a little hard work. When the war ended, Dawes actually earned a lot of money, which was one of the reasons why he was called Lucky Dawes today. Dawes is going to see how his car is being repaired. 2 days ago, Dawes was in a car accident while driving his Renault, but luckily everyone was fine. But the vehicle had to be repaired, and Dawes figured it would be done soon, so he planned to go check it out. These days without a car are too uncomfortable, and I can't take the girl for a ride. The place where the car is repaired is Donut Street, which is not far from him. It is also the most famous street for cars and supplies in Lyon. Here you can buy any brand of cars. As long as you have money, they can even get it for you. Royal car. Of course the cost is astronomical, at least for Dawes. However, when he passed by, he found a lot of people surrounded by a car sales store. It's a beautiful car, yeah, so pretty. The words of the onlookers aroused his interest, and after pushing through the crowd, he discovered that this was a new Volkswagen car. Their reflections are reflected on the sealed body. The rounded front is eye-catching, and the interior is luxurious. Even the curtains on the car windows look like precious fabrics. The more he looked at it, the more he liked the car, but he knew that it was a good car at first sight, and it generally reflected its identity in the price. Still, he couldn't help but ask. The car dealership offered a price of 12,000 francs for a new car, instantly disappearing Dawes' enthusiastic desire to buy a car. It's not that he can't take it out, but how he lives after taking it out. Seeing that Dawes couldn't bear the price, the salesperson immediately followed up and said, "Sir, you can actually see that we have a Volkswagen car with similar performance, but not as luxurious." After hearing this, Dawes thought about it and said, "You can take me to see it." The salesperson at the store immediately brought Dawes to a Volkswagen, pointed to the car and said, "This is a Volkswagen M1 sedan. Compared to the Model S on the outside, there is a gap in the trim. The first one is equipped with a radio, which allows you to listen to the radio while driving to relieve the boredom of driving. And the price is also cheaper than the S-Type outside, and it is possible to drive home for only 4,500 francs. Dawes looked at the car in front of him. That was almost the same as the outside, and his heartbeat reappeared. This car is much better looking than my own Renault, and the price is acceptable to me. Facing the salesperson's words, Dawes said with some irresistible temptation, "Can I try this car?" "No problem." So, accompanied by a salesperson, Dawes drove the M Volkswagen onto the road. The car drives very smoothly, and it's not too noisy. As a veteran driver, Dawes immediately felt the difference in this car. "Sir, you are right. This car uses many new technologies developed by Volkswagen. The 4-wheel independent suspension can ensure the driving experience, and the new 6-cylinder gasoline engine reduces the noise to a minimum. And did you notice that the metal in the front of the car is the bar, but also to ensure the safety of vehicles and personnel?" 4,500 francs is definitely worth the money. When the salesperson said the unique configuration of the new car, he did not forget to sell him the value of the car. In fact, when Dawes was driving, he had already made up his mind. "This car is indeed much better than my own Renault, and it can show its identity, whether it is a gathering of friends or business. The only downside is that it's not a soft shed and you can't lower the roof when you take a woman for a ride. But compared to its advantages, this is not a disadvantage point. After driving the car back to the garage, Dawes paid a deposit of 1,000 francs, and after paying the balance, the car could be driven home. And my own Renault can also be pushed to the second-hand market. I believe that I will be able to sell it by reducing the price point. In fact, there are many people like Dawes in Europe. They have $2 in their hands, but the price of a luxury car is unaffordable. But driving a Model T doesn't show their identity. The new Volkswagen car satisfies their requirements, and the driving experience is also higher than other existing vehicles. Therefore, after the launch of Volkswagen's new car, the sales scene was once hot, and many people sold their original cars and bought this new car instead. The choice of these people was immediately reflected in the sales performance, and when the Volkswagen sales manager held the data of the new car sales, the whole person was very excited. Mr. Ambrose, we succeeded. The sales manager holding the sales data pushed Ambrose, the general manager, and reported the sales data to him loudly. Sold 60,000 new cars a month. Yeah, especially our Model M's are the best seller, with 41,000 of them. The sales manager's words made Ambrose immediately take the data list and read it. In its first month, Volkswagen sold 60,871 new models, including 41,243 Model Ms, 13,414 Model S, and 6,214 Model S's. This data makes Ambrose burst into laughter, because as the most profitable Model S, it can sell more than 6,000 units, which is definitely a new initiative of Volkswagen. This also shows that his thinking is right. It seems that it is necessary to use mid to high-end cars as a new profit growth point for Volkswagen. Chapter 463 Royal William Dockyard. Romanian Eagle. Chapter 445 Royal William Dockyard audio novel. Listen online. The Royal William Dockyard in spring is still so deserted. A small number of shipyard employees are still employed, and they are still diligently maintaining the facilities and equipment in the factory. But today, a crowd of people came to this shipyard. Among them were officials of the German government, representatives of the Allied powers, and several foreign officers in dark blue Navy uniforms. They inspected the entire shipyard under the leadership of the shipyard's director, Fred. Everyone, the dock we are currently in is the largest number 3 dock in the shipyard, and it is also our latest technology dock. It is 250 meters long and 45 meters wide. It is equipped with a large gantry crane that can lift 240 tons and can build 50,000 tons. It is also the pride of our shipyard. Fred explained the shipyard's facilities to the officers in Navy uniforms in front of him, and several naval personnel listened to his explanation and exchanged with each other from time to time. It's just that he never responded to Fred's words, and he was used to it. Everyone, let's go to the board factory next. Where can we find our latest board machines? These machines are new machines that were installed only 15 years ago. At that time, they were prepared to undertake the Mackensen-class battle cruisers. Who knows that there are no orders at all? The name of our shipyard. When several naval officers heard Fred talking about the Mackensen-class war patrol, their eyes lit up, but then they covered it up. Then please, lead the way. The leading naval officer immediately took Fred's words and asked him to lead the way. Afterwards, the group followed Director Fred to every corner of the shipyard and at the same time personally inspected the equipment of the shipyard. Patrols in the shipyard with great fanfare must not be concealed from the employees of the shipyard. Byrne and his party saw these people patrolling the workshop with their own eyes. After these people left, Charlotte immediately said to her colleagues, "It's time to come. I didn't lie to you. These people are definitely here to see the shipyard, and it is estimated that the demolition is not far away." Hearing Charlotte's words, a shadow shrouded the hearts of every worker present. They are mourning for the shipyard and for their own fate. After Bernie heard Cheryl's words, he said, "Don't talk about Cheryl. Everyone has worked in the shipyard for many years, and no one's heart is uncomfortable. We do the work at hand, and the rest can only be left to God to arrange." Bernie's words made everyone's hearts even heavier, and they felt that they lacked strength to work. In fact, the same is true of Byrne. At present, the situation in China is really about to lose a job, and I don't know where to find it. The voice of Bern and others is also the heart of the current shipyard employees. For a large group of people who came to the shipyard suddenly, everyone has a shadow in their hearts, but they also know that they and others have absolutely no way to prevent the possibility of the shipyard being sold, but they are still mourning for themselves and the shipyard. In fact, they were right. These naval officers were from Romania. When the Romanian side learned that the Royal William Dockyard was to be sold as a royal property, Edel, the king, immediately thought of the Romanian Navy. Edel still feels a little guilty about the navy that has been left out in the cold. So after learning the news, I immediately asked the Admiralty to organize personnel to inspect the shipyard facilities. The Admiral Lummerton, the Minister of the Admiralty, who received the good news, and Rear Admiral Nestacu, who returned to Bucharest overnight, drew up a list of personnel. It is completely to dispatch the elite soldiers of the Navy to complete this task, because they knew they were really going to move the shipyard to Romania, and the good days for the Navy were coming. The reason is very simple. The relocation of a large shipyard, where tens of thousands of people can build battleships, can greatly improve the naval strength. If not for the development of the Navy, is it necessary for His Majesty to let them check it out? This is a bald man with lice on his head. Obvious. Therefore, Colonel Jacob, the director of the Naval Equipment Department, Lieutenant Colonel Merrill from the Ship Design Department, and a group of the best technical talents in the Navy were all put into the list by them. And today's inspection is also responsible for several people. The results are very satisfactory to them. Most of the facilities in the shipyard are well preserved, especially the core equipment is carefully maintained. Today we visited the shipyard, and it was quite good. I heard from Director Fred that many of the facilities in this shipyard were purchased in the past few years. Colonel Jacob sat on the sofa and told his colleagues how he felt today. Yeah, the shipyards to be demolished in Germany are more advanced than ours. This makes us feel a huge gap with the maritime powers. Lieutenant Colonel Myril saw the huge gap in the Romanian Navy from this shipyard. The gap will gradually narrow. Starting from this shipyard, Romania will also have the manufacturing capacity of warships of more than 10,000 tons. Colonel Jacob's words made Lieutenant Colonel Myril think of a possibility. Could it be that Your Majesty finally pays attention to the Navy? I didn't say it, but I heard from the minister and the commander that good days may be coming for the Navy. If this is the case, then I hope to demolish a few more large shipyards. In this way, our shipbuilding capacity in Romania will skyrocket. According to the captain of the guard beside His Majesty, this may not be big. What's the reason? Other shipyards are private and not so easy to demolish. In fact, the discussion between the two is correct. The Allies were very happy to sell German shipyards, especially the British side was eager to sell all German shipyards. The threat of the High Seas Fleet to the British Empire, these gentlemen can clearly see. However, most shipyards in Germany belong to the private industry, so they have nowhere to go. However, there is no way to dismantle these shipyards, which does not mean that there is no other way to restrain them. With fines for helping Germany build warships for the war, and the damage to the German economy from the Versailles reparations, these shipyards are currently struggling. And William Royal Dockyard, the royal family's industry, doesn't need to be polite. When Romania expressed its desire to move the shipyard to the country, Britain and France quickly agreed. At the same time, in order to win over Romania, the Royal William Dockyard was sold at a low price. In short, as long as Romania wants German equipment, dismantle it. The two countries can't wait to dismantle all German equipment and sell them for money to compensate for their losses. And in this context, Romanian work in Germany is going very well. If it wasn't for Edel's lack of money, and considering the rise of Germany in the future, he really wanted to pack all these devices back. According to statistics after the fact, in 1920, Romania shipped back equipment worth 20 billion marks from Germany, and the money did not fall into the hands of the German government, and was pocketed by Britain and France as reparations. This aroused the resentment of the German people from Britain and France even more, and also made the Weimar government quite embarrassed. Because the workers are dissatisfied. No jobs. The peasants are dissatisfied. Most of them are used as indemnities. The capitalists are dissatisfied. The economy is depressed and cannot make money. The soldiers are dissatisfied because they signed the Treaty of Versailles, and the scholars are dissatisfied, defeated in war. Later. Punishment is too heavy. It can be said that people at all levels in Germany are dissatisfied with the Weimar government, but this government is recognized by Britain, France and other countries, so no matter how angry they are, there is nothing they can do. Romanian Eagle chapter 464 diatorams. Romanian Eagle chapter 446 diatorams audio novel. Listen online. Other Romanians in Germany were also on duty as naval personnel inspected the Royal Wilhelm dockyard. 2 men in suits were knocking on the door outside a small 2-story building on Hamburg's Lower Strasse. Crench. After the door was opened, an old woman looked out. Then one of the men smiled and said, "Hello, is this Mr. Diatoram's house?" "Yes." "What's the matter with you?" "Hello, we are from Romania. We heard that Mr. Diatorams is currently out of work, so we came to visit." Hearing the man's words, the old woman looked at the two strangers and opened the door. Now that there are too many unemployed people in Germany, the law and order are not very good, and some precautions are normal. It is not surprising that the two of them have already done so. Rams, these two gentlemen are looking for you. After the old woman brought the two to the living room, she immediately went upstairs and shouted to a room. At this time, there was a slow response from the room. "Okay mom, I understand. Come over when I finish this picture and ask them to wait for a while." Who knew that this sentence made the old woman a little unhappy and immediately shouted through the door loudly, "I keep drawing your drawings every day when I have nothing to do. Can these drawings become real? You have been kicked out by the design bureau. Don't forget those ships. One day I'm not happy and I'll bring all your blueprints to the fire." The two visitors who were listening to the conversation looked at each other and smiled silently. After a while, the old woman came to them with a teapot and 2 cups. "You two, please have some tea first." "Thanks." Looking at the inferior black tea in the cup in front of them, combined with the clean but severely worn furniture in the living room, the two have a general understanding of the economic situation of the family. The waiting time for the two was not long, and a middle-aged man in his 40s in a shirt and vest walked downstairs. After a while, her hair looked messy, as if she hadn't taken care of it for several days, and the vest was probably only worn because the buckle was misplaced, but the owner didn't notice it. The two had seen the photos before they came and could be sure it was Diatorams himself. "Hello Mr. Diatorams." Before he could walk in front of him, the two greeted him and said, "My name is Alex. This is my colleague Boris. We are from Romania." In the face of the enthusiasm of the two, Diatorams will be much calmer. He stretched out his hand to shake hands with the two and said, "Good morning, gentlemen." After the three of them were seated, Diatorams said directly, "If you have anything to say, just tell me. I'm still busy and need to draw." In the face of Diatorams' direct, the two immediately overturned the previous plan, and the Romanian named Alex said, "Then let's just say it straight. We are Romanian naval personnel. I heard that your excellency has his own unique views on ship design, so I intend to invite you to design warships for our navy. Romanian Navy. Yes, that's right, the Romanian Navy. Diatorams, who answered in the affirmative, said with a smile, "As far as I know, the Romanian Navy's largest warship at present is a Coburg-class cruiser in our country. You must know that the ship I designed is much larger than this one. Do you get government funding?" Don't blame Diatorams for saying that, because it's about the current state of the Romanian Navy, and he's saying it better. Among the German naval designers contacted by Romania, most of them heard the invitation from the Romanian Navy, but politely declined, and both of them are used to it. Mr. Diatorams, our current naval strength is indeed not on the table. However, our country has now recognized the insufficiency of this problem and has already increased its naval military expenditure. In addition, our country is negotiating the purchase of the Royal William Dockyard. As long as this shipyard can be relocated to Romania, we will have the ability to manufacture warships of more than 10,000 tons. I think your excellency is no stranger to the capabilities of the Royal William Dockyard. Faced with the words of the two, Diaterams certainly knew the strength of the Royal William Dockyard. I have been to a large shipyard that can build a king class, and I have been there many times. However, the relocation of the shipyard is not a trivial matter, and the loss of employees and equipment during the relocation is not small point. As soon as the two heard that the recruitment was interesting, they immediately followed up and said, of course, we will recruit employees from the original shipyard, as long as they are willing to go to Romania. And in order to enhance the strength of this shipyard, we will also recruit excellent shipbuilders in Germany. Mechanic. We will strive to make this shipyard a world famous shipyard and let the world know its name. Diaterams listened to the Romanian Navy officer finish, and then asked, but this is just your Romanian plan. But what does it have to do with me? Faced with the question suddenly raised by Mr. Diaterams, the two of them did not respond immediately. What? I said it's just your Romanian plan, and it has nothing to do with me. In the face of Diaterams' intruding question, the two immediately racked their brains to think. Wrong direction. It's quite possible. You must know that, Mr. Diaterams, but in the German Naval Ship Design Bureau, there is also a discord with his colleagues. In fact, from the very beginning, when he received the two of them, he showed no doubt that he would let the other person finish talking quickly when receiving others, and he was still busy with something. It is also because of his character, otherwise he would not be gifted in design, and he was laid off immediately. For such a withdrawn genius designer, it is indeed impossible to use the previous waypoint. After trying to understand the problem, Alex continued, indeed, the shipyard is only the construction facility, and the designer is the soul of the warship. I wonder if your excellency can give us a tour of your workshop. We heard you in drawing the blueprints. We happen to know a thing or two about the design of warships. You also understand warship design. Know a bit. Sure enough, after hearing that the two of them also understood ship design, Diaterams' attitude gap became unusual. He warmly invited, then come and see me and evaluate my work. The two followed Diaterams to his workshop. As soon as the door of the workshop was opened, there were scattered drawings and a half-drawn hull drawing, and there were still some dried coffee stains on the workbench, proclaiming that this talented designer is not a person who likes to deal with details. Diaterams pulled the two to a drawing, pointed to it, and said to the two, guess what ship this drawing is based on. The two of them looked at this drawing with a huge chimney standing on it, which was a bit like a Bavarian class, and the turret layout was one after the other, so there was no German style at all, but the layout of the two triangular rails was somewhat similar. The Flinger class battle cruiser. And look at its floor plan, more like. After the two exchanged for a while, they tried to say, is this a major change in the Flinger class? After hearing the words of the two, Diaterams said happily, that's right, this is a greatly changed blueprint of the Fringer class. I changed the 4 turret with the first 2 and the second layout to the 3 turret with the first 2 and one after the other, so that you can have an extra gun. And the flow is also changed to 1, like the Bavarian class. The Battle of Jutland has shown that too many flues increase the chance of being hit and affect shooting. No thinking of the ship that has been changed. You can hardly see the prototype, and you can also know the whole story. Obviously this is a test, and if the two can't answer it, the visit is likely to end there. After the passage, Diaterams pulled the two of them to the other drawings and described the plan he designed. The two saw improved drawings based on various warships: Bavaria class, Mackensen class, King class, Queen Elizabeth class, Duke of Cavour class, United Force class, Wyoming class, etc. The two felt that they came to the improvement of the drawings of the main ships of various countries. Of course, in addition to improving the capital ship, Diaterams also made other ship drawings, but these drawings cannot be seen in his hands at all. This is not to blame for the two of them, who knew that this person was so perverted that he simply collected all the drawings of ships from various countries. The two also asked him curiously about this, who knew that Diaterams said that most of his drawings were surveyed and drawn through photos. Because the design principles of warships are the same, as long as the principles are thoroughly understood, the 3 reasonable layouts of firepower, speed and protection can be achieved. These words made sense, and the two of them were a little red-faced when they heard it. Sure enough, The genius is not ordinary. Point. After visiting his studio, the two who felt they had found the treasure immediately strongly recommended the talented designer to Callist, and said that the warship that can guarantee Romania's future navy is in a first-class design level. And His Excellency the Captain of the Guard is very curious that a single designer can guarantee the quality of naval ship design. So one day, the captain of the bodyguard rushed over with the naval negotiator. These naval personnel are somewhat dissatisfied with the idea that one person can change the design level, and none of them dare to say such a big word if they have not been deposited in it for many years at this time. Diatarams showed his perverted ability. He was speechless to the rebuttals of all the Romanian naval personnel who came, and was impressed by the talent of this genius. For this reason, Callist also deliberately informed Edel of the genius Diatarams through a telegram. Diatarams never heard of this one's name. Edel thought about it with the telegram, and he has never heard of this person who left a big name in his later generations. But it doesn't matter if you haven't heard of it, as long as Romania is a genius, it can go all out to recruit. After all, Romania needs a navy in the future, and he is not reconciled to the fact that his forces will be shrunk into the Black Sea. So under Edel's instructions, Romania offered the genius the seat of chief ship designer. More importantly, he gave him a 3-year commitment, and he will be responsible for designing a warship of more than 10,000 tons for the Romanian navy. Within 6 years, he designed another battleship for Romania. It is also a unique condition in the world to open up the design tasks of 2 warships for one ship designer, not to mention a battleship, which is simply incredible. So Diatarams became famous, and the other powers were amazed by Romania's actions. In the ship design world, it also caused an uproar, and the battleships were not facing competition from many peers, and there were even a few people who used outboard tricks. The consequence of this is that there are many unwilling ship designers who have a great interest in Romania. They all took their own plans and went to Romania to sell themselves. They did not seek the same conditions as Diatarams, as long as their own designs could meet the construction requirements. However, so many designers rushed to Romania, which made the naval department feel a lot of pressure. But unfortunately, most of the unlucky designers are not really strong enough, and only a few are real talents. And these talents, of course, the naval department did not let go, and they were immediately enriched into the design department. Therefore, the strength of Romanian ship design is also growing rapidly. After the relocation of the Royal William shipyard, a large number of excellent design drawings were also placed in front of the navy. At this time, they also experienced the troubles of happiness. Romanian Eagle Chapter 465. The outbreak of the Soviet-Polish War. When Romania was stepping up its domestic economic construction, Poland's war against Soviet Russia officially broke out. On the Belarusian front, Polish troops launched an attack on the Soviet troops on the Berezina front on February 14. Polish troops of 120,000 were attacking the southwest front with 80,000 Soviet troops. At the same time, the Polish Third Army, bypassing the Romania-occupied western Ukraine, attacked Kyiv. Piłsudski's dream of a federation of the two seas has not been abandoned, except that the Romanian occupation of western Ukraine is excluded. The Polish army progressed smoothly in the early stage, not only conquering Minsk, the capital of Belarus, but also occupying Kyiv. For a time, Poland's war intention to realize Poland's largest territory is about to be realized. In the face of the Polish attack, the Soviet Union immediately dispatched troops. At this time, the Red Army had already defeated the White Army, and Denikin had failed and retreated to the Crimean Peninsula to survive. In the Caucasus, the Soviet Union has also advanced to the mountainous areas. As for Kolchak in Siberia, it has completely failed, and he was also captured by the Soviet army. The opposition that could threaten the Soviet Russian regime for a while has ceased to exist. At the same time, Soviet Russia signed peace agreements with Latvia and Estonia, and the threat on the flank was also lifted. Therefore, in the face of the Polish attack, Lenin and others sent generals led by Tukhachevsky to grow up through the civil war. This genius general can be said to be very young at this time. Born in 1893, he is only 27 years old even now. Although young, he has a lot of battlefield experience. He was born in a decaying aristocratic family in Orogob County, Smolensk Province, Russia. In 1911, he entered the Moscow Yekaterinina No. 1 armament school to study. The following year, he was elected to the Alexander Military Academy for further studies, and he graduated in 1914 to serve in the Semenov Guards after the outbreak of the First World War. Tukhachevsky went to the front with the troops and was captured by the Germans on February 19, 1915. In October 1917, he escaped and returned home. After the August Revolution, formerly the October Revolution, broke out, Tukhachevsky was introduced to the Soviet Red Army and the Communist Party, becoming the first former Tsarist Russian officer to join the Communist Party. As soon as Tukhachevsky joined the Bolshevik Party, he was entrusted with important tasks. He was ordered to go to the Eastern Front to reorganize the scattered troops and prepare for the establishment of the First Army of the Red Army. He accomplished the task well in a short time and personally led his troops to defeat the White Guards many times. Then he appeared in various areas of the Civil War. Whether it was against Kolchak or Denikin, his excellent command ability helped him win. And now facing the Polish attack, Lenin and others thought of him immediately. So, after he was named commander-in-chief in April, Tukhachevsky immediately dispatched troops. In the following month, Soviet Russia concentrated more than 700,000 people on the front line in Poland, while the Polish army only had 500,000 people. In terms of military strength, the Soviet Union has an advantage. Although Poland is still recruiting, it is impossible for these troops to appear on the battlefield now. Even so, Tukhachevsky is still gathering troops. Why would he do this? It turned out that Poland began a military operation to claim Russian-occupied lands from Soviet Russia. This greatly violated the patriotism of Soviet Russia and also hurt the passion and yearning for world revolution that almost all leaders of Soviet Russia harbored. How could a Poland, considered by the leaders of Soviet Russia to be the Red Bridge of the world revolution, become a passage against Soviet Russia? Thus Polish patriotism collided with that of Soviet Russia. On April 29, the Central Committee of the Russian Communist Party, Brazzaville, issued a statement calling on workers and peasants, respected Russian citizens to rise up to defend the Soviet Republic. For the first time, the Russian traditional patriotism and the concept of Russia, criticized by Lenin, were seen by the Soviet regime as a weapon to win the war against Poland. And under the banner of Russian patriotism, what was to be achieved was not only the war against Poland victory. A red Poland is in the interests of the Soviet Union, which is why Tukhachevsky still thinks that there are not enough troops. He wants to establish a Soviet regime in Poland, because after Poland is the crossroads of Europe. Germany, and Lenin and others have their own ideas about the current turbulent Germany. But while waiting for other troops to gather, Tukhachevsky will not do nothing. The 1st Polish Army Corps, located in the extreme north, was the first to be attacked. At the end of May, the Soviet Union counterattacked. The Polish First Army was defeated, and the Russian 15th Army recaptured the area between the Daugava and Berezina rivers on May 24, 1920. Polish troops in the south encountered Semyon Budyonny's 1st Cavalry Army for the first time. On June 5, Budyonny broke through the Polish front with Cossack cavalry. Soviet Russia then used mobile cavalry to attack the rear of the Polish army for communications and supplies. By June 10, the Polish army fully retreated, and on June 13, Kyiv was abandoned. At this time, the Polish army was already facing layers of oppression by the Soviet Russian Red Army, and Tukhachevsky sent several troops at this time, which made the Polish army fall into the situation of caring for one and the other in the Belarusian region. For a time, Poland was losing ground, and all the territories it had captured before were lost. At this time, Tukhachevsky still did not give Poland a chance to regroup, and led the army to continue to march towards the Polish hinterland. Tukhachevsky launched an offensive along the Smolensk-Brest-Litovsk line on the 4th of July, crossing the Ota and Berezina rivers. The 3rd Cavalry Corps in the north intends to snatch the Polish army from the north and move closer to the borders of Lithuania and East Prussia. The 4th, 15th, and 3rd armies pressed westward, supported in the south by the 16th and Mazarska armies. By July 7th, the Polish army was forced to retreat across the board. However, due to the stubborn resistance of the Polish army, Tukhachevsky's attempt to break through the Polish front and push the Polish army to the southwest of the Pinsk swamp failed. At this time, the Russian army advanced almost 20 miles a day. Grodno in Belarus was lost on July 19th, and Brest-Litovsk was occupied by Russian forces on August 1st. At this point the Poles realized that the Russians' goals were no longer limited to moving the border westward, and that Poland's independence was at stake. At this time, the British government issued a substantial ultimatum to Soviet Russia, demanding that Soviet Russia cease hostilities against Poland. And the Russian army, the White Army led by Wrangel in southern Russia, as well as accepting the Curzon line as a temporary border between Soviet Russia and Poland until a permanent border is negotiated. If Soviet Russia refused, Britain threatened to assist Poland in all possible ways, but in reality Britain was also limited by domestic political situation. On July 17, Soviet Russia rejected the British ultimatum and counter-proposed to negotiate directly with Poland. The British response was to suspend trade negotiations with Soviet Russia if Soviet Russia continued to attack Poland, which was ignored by Soviet Russia. In fact, Poland had very few allies at this time. France sent an advisory group of 400 people to Poland in 1919 and assisted the Blue Army, mainly composed of Polish origins and commanded by France during World War I, to arrive in Poland from France. Hungary expressed its willingness to send 30,000 cavalry troops to support Poland, but Czechoslovakia refused to allow them to cross the border. However, some trains loaded with weapons still arrived in Poland from Hungary. At this time, Poland looked around, and there was only one country that could help itself, and that was Romania, which had previously defeated Soviet Russia. At this time, in order to maintain its independent status, Poland, on the one hand, requested the help of Britain, France and other countries, and on the other hand, sent a delegation headed by Prime Minister Morawiecki overnight to Bucharest to ask Romania for help. The only one who can save them at the moment is Romania. It needs to be said here that, in order to get to Bucharest quickly, Morawiecki flew directly to Romania on an unarmed plane. This was more than a decade earlier than Chamberlain flew to Berlin for peace. Poland accidentally made history and became the first leader to fly on a business jet. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 466, The Lobo Friendship Agreement. 1. The airport outside Bucharest is where the original Condor aircraft factory was located. But now the Condor aircraft factory has been moved away and is only used as a flying venue. But today, Minister of Foreign Affairs Barnosk led someone to wait at this humble airport in person, which attracted the attention of many Air Force personnel stationed at this airport. His Excellency the Minister has long been calm. He is here today just to welcome one person, the arrival of Polish Prime Minister Morawiecki. I didn't expect that this war in Poland would be so badly fought. Yeah, it is estimated that they saw us beating up the Soviet Union. They also wanted to use this method to solve the territorial dispute without considering their own strength. Okay, stop talking, you two. Pay attention to the occasion. Hearing the entourage behind him recklessly commenting on Poland, Barnosk couldn't help but turn his head and criticize them. After quieting down behind him, Barnosk patiently waited for the arrival of the Polish Prime Minister, as he always had. Your Excellency, you see, a plane has come alive. The entourage he saw reminded him. Barnosk looked up, and sure enough, 3 small black dots appeared in the sky. As the distance got closer, the black dot slowly revealed that it was an airplane. After the 3 planes landed, Barnosk immediately led someone to greet them. Hello, Prime Minister Morawiecki. Prime Minister Morawiecki, who was slightly exhausted, immediately replied, hello, Foreign Minister Barnosk. Seeing the tired Polish Prime Minister, Barnosk asked with concern, do you want to rest first? Hearing the words of the Romanian Foreign Minister, Prime Minister Morawiecki said with a bitter smile, no need, the current situation makes me unable to rest. Take me directly to meet the Prime Minister of your country. Since the Prime Minister does not plan to rest, Barnosk will not be busy. Immediately led Prime Minister Morawiecki and his party to the motorcade that was already waiting outside and drove to the Prime Minister's office. there, Prime Minister Brezhnev had been waiting for a long time. When the motorcade drove to the Prime Minister's office, Prime Minister Morawiecki used this time to ask the Foreign Minister, "Your Excellency, what do you think of the war between our country and the Soviet Union? Although the country of Soviet Russia was founded by the communists, but I think it is no different from the original Russia. Both are greedy for territory. Neither are they polite to the Ukrainian or Belarusian governments. They are just wrapped in a coat of liberation of their citizens." In the face of Barnosk's answer, Prime Minister Morawiecki agreed very much. Yes, our country also thinks so. They occupy the homeland of Poland and will not let go. When the civil war was at its most dangerous, they pretended to plan to discuss the return with our country. When the internal pressure eased, they immediately turned their face and refused to admit it. Unfortunately, our country did not recognizing their faces. I really thought that they were kind enough to return the territory to us and negotiated with them. If I had known this, my country should not have negotiated to directly recover the territory. But it is too late to say anything now, and my country is to blame. The government was established too short to recognize their faces, but it's not too late. European countries will not watch Poland being bullied by Soviet Russia. Barnosk's tone was very tight, and sympathy did not reveal Romania's intention to help Poland at all. In the face of the Romanian foreign minister's words, Prime Minister Morawiecki knew that it was impossible to make a cliché, so the team was quiet for a while. Prime Minister Morawiecki has no idea whether he can invite Romania to send troops to help. The convoy quickly arrived at the Prime Minister's office, and Prime Minister Brezhnev, who had already received the news, stood at the door to greet the neighbors. After Prime Minister Morawiecki got out of the car, His Excellency the Prime Minister immediately stepped forward to greet him. Welcome to Your Excellency the Prime Minister to Bucharest. His Excellency. The Prime Minister came to greet him in person. On behalf of the Polish government, I'm very grateful. The two stood together and greeted each other first. Your Excellency. Otherwise let's go first. Just to my liking. Please. Your Excellency. Please go first. The two walked into the Prime Minister's office, and other personnel followed closely. After the two brought their entourage to the parliamentary hall to sit down, Prime Minister Morawiecki immediately stated his intention to travel. Your Excellency. Prime Minister, this time I'm here to ask for help on behalf of the Polish people. At present, the Soviet Russian army is approaching Warsaw, and the people of our government are about to be enslaved by Soviet Russia. If Soviet Russia occupies Warsaw, the threat to neighboring countries will be great increase. The three Baltic countries will face the pressure of Soviet Russia alone, and at present Germany is completely unable to resist the army of Soviet Russia, and the new Czech Republic is not an opponent of Soviet Russia. The difficult peace situation will be broken under the threat of Soviet Russia. This is unacceptable to the peace-loving European people. Moreover, your country will also face threats from the Soviet Union and Russia from two directions, and the pressure on your country's defense will also increase. Our country has always been a good neighborly and friendly country with your country. At this time of difficulty, our country asks your country to lend a helping hand to help our suffering compatriots. In the face of Prime Minister Morawiecki's many reasons for sending troops, Prime Minister Brezhnev said slowly, I can understand your country's urgency, but the matter of sending troops is too important after all. I need report to His Majesty the King and discuss the issue of sending troops with the military after the King agrees. After all, sending troops requires the consent of the military. In the face of Prime Minister Brezhnev's shirk, Prime Minister Morawiecki was a little anxious for a while. However, this is not a shirk on the bright side. After all, it needs to be discussed with the King and the military, which will take time. The word negotiation can be quantified. A few hours can be considered a negotiation, and a few months can be considered a negotiation. At present, what Poland lacks most is time. You must know that the Soviet Russian army is not far from Warsaw. Before coming, Piłsudski said that the Soviet Russian army would arrive in Warsaw in 10 days at most. This was based on the fierce resistance of the army, so Poland is currently the most short of time. Prime Minister Morawiecki, who could not wait, immediately offered Poland's conditions. I know that it will take time for your country to do these things, and the Polish people will not forget these help. In order to express our country's willingness to have good neighborly relations with Romania. Our country has decided not to make any territorial claims to Eastern Galicia. And our country I'm willing to sign a mutual defense treaty with your country, and when either country faces an attack by the Soviet Union and Russia, the other side must give the other side all help, including the army. When Prime Minister Morawiecki said this, he was interrupted by Prime Minister Bricianu. Your Excellency Prime Minister, this seems to be beneficial to your country. Facing the problem pointed out by Prime Minister Bricianu. Morawiecki explained without changing his face, we need to take a long-term view. In the future, both you and our country will face the threat of the Soviet Union and Russia. This clause applies to both of us. That's it. And also please say. In order to express our gratitude for your country's help, our country is willing to provide the cost of this military dispatch. Gone. There is none left. Chapter 467. The Lobo Friendship Agreement, Part 2. After listening to the conditions given by Prime Minister Morawiecki, Bricianu said with a smile, Your Excellency, we have received the conditions of your country. But I need to discuss it before I can tell whether you will send troops. Answer. When Morawiecki heard Prime Minister Bricianu's words, he secretly said that it was not good. So he immediately said, Your Excellency Prime Minister, can you tell me what conditions are needed to send troops to help our country? Seeing Prime Minister Morawiecki, who didn't even care about diplomatic etiquette, Bricianu told Romania's conditions. Our country has no other requirements, as long as your country does not make any territorial claims on Eastern Galicia. In addition, it is necessary to sign an economic and trade friendship agreement to reduce the tariffs of your country and our country to each other to 5. Unexpectedly, Morawiecki stood up immediately after hearing the conditions stated by Prime Minister Bricianu. Your Excellency Prime Minister, our country cannot accept this condition. The tariff is too low, and it is too harmful to our economy. Morawiecki is the Prime Minister in the end. He immediately found the most crucial part from the Romanian condition. The tariffs on each other 5 will indeed bring the two countries' economic ties closer. However, it is necessary to consider what Poland produces and what Romania produces to understand how beneficial this condition is to Romania. At present, Poland mainly produces food and light industrial products, while Romania produces mainly food, oil and industrial products such as automobiles. Among these products, food is excluded first, and neither country will import from each other, and Romania has light industrial products, while Poland has no commodities such as oil and automobiles. This treaty completely uses Poland as a dumping ground for Romanian goods. It will be 100 times more difficult for Poland to establish the same industry in the future, because there will not be defense against similar products in Romania. How can this not let Morawiecki object? He came to ask for help, not to betray the country. The reaction of Prime Minister Morawiecki was expected by Bricianu. In fact, he even considered the Prime Minister's departure at dawn in a rage. The dangers of this trade agreement are well known. Romania is not an open Shantang. How could it send troops to help Poland in vain? Please, we are not familiar with each other. Of course we need to talk about interests, and this condition is just to test Poland's response and tolerance. At present, it seems that Poland is indeed very urgent, so it will be easy to talk about it later. Prime Minister Bricianu said with a smile. This condition is just a preliminary draft by our country that doesn't know much about the actual situation in Poland, and we can still talk about it. Hearing that Romania can negotiate on this condition, Morawiecki immediately realized that he was in a hurry. So he calmed down and said, I can accept the first condition of your country, but the second condition is too harsh for our country. Even if I talk about it, the parliament and the government will not accept it. After seeing the softening of Prime Minister Morawiecki's attitude, Bricianu continued, that's why we need to negotiate terms that are acceptable to both parties. At present, our differences are mainly on tariffs and the economic and trade friendship agreement. So how much tariff can your country accept? Prime Minister Bricianu's words made Prime Minister Morawiecki ponder. At present, the overall tariff on the opposite side of Poland is about 22. Since the Romanian condition is to have economic benefits, it is impossible to continue to give such tariffs. However, the tariff issue affects all aspects, not only domestic, but also other countries' response to this will also need to be considered by Poland. If you want Romania to send troops to help Poland, then you can't talk about it if you give it high, and Poland will suffer if you give it low. At this time, Prime Minister Morawiecki was faced with a dilemma, so he tried to say, I think our two countries are helping each other more closely, and a tariff of 15 is a reasonable number. Unexpectedly, after listening to his conditions, Prime Minister Brezhnev said without thinking, it's too high, which will make the military unsatisfied. After all, sending troops needs to convince the military. After hearing Prime Minister Brezhnev's message, Prime Minister Morawiecki couldn't help but say, so what is the reasonable tariff for your country? I think 7 is a number acceptable to both sides. Given what is acceptable to your country. In the face of Morawiecki's inquiry, the Prime Minister put on a face that fully considered the other party and gave the latest figures. It's not good. It's still too low. Not only will my country not agree to such a low tariff, but it will also not accept Britain and France. This time, Prime Minister Morawiecki not only said that his own country could not accept it, but also brought it out of Britain and France. Considering Romania's possible reaction, he also re-quoted a price point for the sake of the relationship between the two countries. We can also lower our teeth by 1. This cannot be lowered, otherwise we will not be able to explain to either side. I believe in you asshole. Your Excellency, the old fritter-like Prime Minister, how can he take the other party's last condition in his heart? In the end, I have heard too much about the low price, and who really takes it seriously? The military still won't agree to the conditions you gave. It's too high. All these troops have the idea of expanding their territory. They don't know much about economics. They don't send troops when they see this condition. Even if you send troops, it will be a long time. Your country doesn't want to suffer in this regard. Hearing that Prime Minister Brezhnev always used the military as a shield, Morawiecki couldn't help but ask, Your Excellency Prime Minister, does your country not command the military? When I saw Prime Minister Morawiecki, I was dissatisfied with myself for always using the army as an excuse. Prime Minister Brezhnev not only told the truth, Your Excellency Prime Minister, the situation in our country is different from that of your country. After the war, the military's power has increased greatly, and the government has indeed been unable to command. Because our country is a kingdom system, the military ranks high in command. Your Majesty the King, you won't let me command the king. Prime Minister Brezhnev's explanation made Prime Minister Morawiecki a little stunned, and he could explain the kingdom system in this way. So the two went back and forth on the tariff issue. You increase by 1, and I decrease by 1. It was long before the lights came on before the conditions for Romanian troops to be dispatched were finally negotiated. Romania will send troops to aid Poland within 4 days, of which at least 200,000 troops will be sent to Poland. As for the issue of command, Romania will be used as a strategic unit and must not be split. The Polish side only needs to give the target, and the Romanian army is responsible for the marching route and combat plan. And in order to facilitate the command of the two sides, Poland will send liaison officers to the Romanian reinforcement, and Romania will also send liaison officers to Poland to ensure the coordinated operations of the two sides. As a condition for Romania to send troops, Poland would not be allowed to claim sovereignty over Eastern Galicia. At the same time, the two sides signed a mutual defense treaty. When either country faces an attack by the Soviet Union and Russia, the other party must give the other party all help, including the army. This is what Prime Minister Morawiecki strongly requested, and in order to make the other side made concessions on tariffs, and the Prime Minister agreed, finally, on the economic and trade friendship agreement that the two sides are most concerned about. The two sides have determined that the 10 tariff will be used as the benchmark. This economic and trade friendship agreement is valid for 15 years, the same as the mutual defense treaty. The terms of the Robo friendship agreement that night appeared in Edel's hands. After reading the agreement, he said to the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister has worked hard to negotiate such generous terms for Romania. My expectation is 12 tariffs. No, it's the Prime Minister's credit to think that we can still talk about 10 at this time. His Excellency the Prime Minister, who consumed too much energy because of the negotiation, said with a smile, this credit is still due to the Soviet Union. Whoever asked them to go to Warsaw? Hearing the Prime Minister's rare joke, Edel and the Marshal President both laughed. If you think carefully about what the Prime Minister said, Poland would not have signed such a treaty if the Soviet Union had not pushed Poland to the point of life and death point. After holding back his smile, Edel asked the chief of staff on the side, "Can your military send troops within 4 days?" His Excellency the Chief of General Staff, who had already reached the pinnacle of the military, patted his chest and assured him, "Don't worry, Your Majesty, the army has already been assembled. The Polish army of 11 divisions, 1 brigade, and 5 heavy artillery regiments is ready, and this time it will still be composed of Admiral Ploiesti in command. As long as His Majesty gives an order, they can be reinforced immediately. Point." After thinking about it, Edel said, "That's good. We can't make the neighbors wait too fast, and we will set off in 2 days. Yes, Your Majesty. Point next, let's see if Tukhachevsky, the talented commander, is considering reinforcement for Romania." Chapter 468 The Battle of Warsaw 1. A train station is a city's transportation artery, connecting bridges to other areas. And in Lviv, the transportation hub of Eastern Galicia, the train station is even more so. Point today the railway station is heavily guarded, and a large number of soldiers protect the railway station. All the passengers were not released, causing many people to secretly discuss whether the army had made a big move. Point they guessed right. The newly formed Polish army was boarding a train and heading for Poland here. Admiral Ploiesti, the commander, was watching the soldiers board the train at the station. Point looking at the soldiers who kept boarding the car. Admiral Ploiesti asked an officer wearing a Polish military uniform beside him, "Colonel Dorokavas, our army is marching towards Poland. You can guarantee to reach Lublin. Is the road clear?" Lublin is located southeast of Warsaw, 80 kilometers from Warsaw and 70 kilometers from Brest. Whether it is reinforcing Warsaw or attacking Brest to threaten the Soviet Union's back, it is an excellent starting point. So Admiral Ploiesti chose this place as the rallying point for the Romanian army. And this has also been reported to the Polish side, and they also agreed with Admiral Ploiesti's choice. Point Colonel Dorokavas, who was being questioned, was assigned by the newly established Polish National Defense Commission to be a liaison officer beside General Ploiesti. The National Defense Committee also temporarily replaced the Congress, which was difficult to reach a consensus after the Soviet Union attacked Poland. The leader of the National Defense Committee is Piłsudski. Point please rest assured, Your Excellency, I sent a telegram to the country last night. All trains from Lviv to Lublin will be suspended, just to ensure the passage of your army. By the way, you really don't need it. Does my country send trains to help with transportation? After taking a look at Colonel Dorokavas, Admiral Ploiesti replied, "No, there are enough trains in our country for transportation at present. You must ensure that the city is still in your hands before our army arrives in Lublin." Hearing Admiral Ploiesti's words, Colonel Dorokavas said with a serious face, "Please rest assured, even if the defenders of Lublin fought to the last person, they would not let the city fall to the Soviet army in hand. Point so much the better." When the Romanian army was preparing to march on Lublin, the atmosphere of the civil war in the Defense Council in Warsaw was getting heavier and heavier. At this time, Piłsudski was not having a good time as its leader militarily. The 4th and 15th armies of the Soviet-Russian army had already attacked the Narew River, and the Polish 5th army had been defeated all the way. The Masovia area north of Warsaw has no armed forces that can withstand these Soviet-Russian troops, and the only thing they can rely on is to retreat to the Wieluszka River for defense. But in this case, Warsaw's back will be exposed in front of the Soviet-Russian army. Point. And in the frontal battlefield, Razumin, located 15 kilometers from Warsaw, was being attacked by the Russian army, and the defenders asked Piłsudski for help. However, now the Polish army has no usable troops, and it is too small to send in, so he ordered the defenders to stand firm. His order lowered the morale of the Polish army a lot. Point. However, Piłsudski also has his own difficulties. At present, there are 3 Soviet armies numbered 3, 12, and 16 near Warsaw, which makes Piłsudski completely afraid to invest his few reserves battlefield. And some politicians are fleeing the capital, and Polish morale is in danger of collapsing. Point. Now he is all counting on the arrival of the 210,000 Romanian reinforcement under the command of Admiral Ploiesti, in order to alleviate the absolute disadvantage of the troops. This is also the reason why he must ensure that the road from Lviv to Lublin is smooth at all costs. To this end, he also sent the 3rd Army, which had returned from Kiev, to Lublin to strengthen the local defense, because the First Army of the Russian cavalry under the command of General Budani had appeared nearby. Politically, Piłsudski was just as difficult. Other political parties in Poland have accused Piłsudski of giving up a large amount of their land as a traitorous act. At one point he was forced to say that if Warsaw fell, he would rush to the enemy with his beloved horse chestnut. Abroad, in France and England, he was promoted as the culprit behind Poland's demise. In Soviet Russia he was considered a hypocritical servant in the eradication of the imperialist alliance. From Lenin to Lloyd George, from Pravda to the Morning Star, he was considered a military and political underdog. Unlike Piłsudski, who was struggling, Tukhachevsky, who set up his headquarters in Minsk, was very satisfied with the battlefield situation. At present, more than 400,000 Soviet and Russian troops have attacked the vicinity of Warsaw, and now the Polish army in Warsaw has faced threats from both sides of the Soviet and Russian troops. And as far as he knows, there are only less than 100,000 defenders in Warsaw, and it seems that winning Warsaw is no longer a problem. The only thing to worry about at the moment is that the army is advancing too fast, making the supply somewhat unable to keep up. But it doesn't matter. At present, a transport team of 80,000 people is running around the transport line day and night to deliver supplies to the soldiers on the front line. There seems to be nothing to be overlooked at the moment, and the next thing to consider is Germany. The instructor once said that Germany is the crossroads of Europe, and its large number of working classes will become a help to liberate the world. Next, I need to find more information about Germany. Just as the young Tukhachevsky looked out the window and imagined the future, a report interrupted him. Looking at the incoming staff officer, Tukhachevsky asked, "What's the matter?" "This is a message from our intelligence agents lurking in Lviv." After the staff officer finished speaking, he handed him a telegram. Tukhachevsky took the telegram, opened it, and read it. This was the information that he had found a change in the Romanian army in Lviv. The above said that yesterday the Romanian army blocked the railway station and saw a large number of trains heading towards Poland. Because the Romanian army patrols closely, intelligence officers can't get too close. So I don't know what's going on inside the train. This information made Tukhachevsky ponder what Romania was packing in the train. Whether it's the army or weapons and equipment, this is very important to him. Let Lviv's intelligence personnel continue to investigate. In addition, let the 11th and 14th armies go immediately. Tukhachevsky said it was stuck here because he did not know whether Romania was shipping troops or weapons. If it is a weapon, then these two armies should be reinforced with the Soviet-Russian army on the Warsaw front. If it is an army, then it is necessary to strengthen the front line of the 1st Cavalry Army to prevent it from being flanked by the enemy. It can be seen from this that the disadvantage of Tukhachevsky's headquarters being set up hundreds of kilometers in the rear is that he does not know enough about the situation on the front line. In the end, Tukhachevsky planned for the worst and ordered the two armies to immediately reinforce the 1st Cavalry Army. At the same time, in order to avoid long nights, he also ordered the Soviet and Russian troops on the front line of Warsaw to attack Warsaw immediately. So the vigorous Battle of Warsaw started like this. Chapter 469 Battle of Warsaw 2. After receiving the order of Tukhachevsky, the Russian army immediately launched an attack on Warsaw, and the Polish defenders in Razumin were the first to feel the pressure. Attack. The Soviet-Russian army commander looked at Razumin's broken line of defense and ordered another attack. Come on, the Russians are up. The Polish defenders, who had just repelled the Soviet-Russian attack, dragged their tired bodies and raised their weapons under the command of the officers to fight with the attacking enemy again. The two sides fought back and forth around Razumin, and every moment someone fell. However, this time, the continuous attacks of Soviet Russia finally paid off, and the Polish defenders, who could not rest, could no longer withstand it. The enemy has escaped, and we are victorious. In the sound of the shouting of the Soviet Russian soldiers, the Polish defenders finally fled in a large area. A large number of Polish troops fled this dead place. No matter how encouraged by the commander, they fled to the rear without looking back. Razumin was finally broken by the Soviet-Russian army on the evening of August 11th, and now Warsaw will face the Soviet-Russian attack directly. The fall of Razumin made the morale of the Polish army turbulent. At this time, Piłsudski could only personally boost the morale of the defenders of the bridgehead located east of the Vistula River. With his identity as the founder of the Polish army, the morale boost this time worked, and the soldiers gradually stabilized. From this, we can see Piłsudski's prestige in the army, but he also knew that the morale of the army needed victory to maintain. At present, Poland needs a victory too much, but at present he still needs to wait for strong assistance from Romania. Admiral Farit, who had high hopes by Piłsudski, had just arrived in Lublin. At this time, he had just learned from the Polish defenders that Lazimin had been attacked by the Soviet Union. Things are a little troublesome. Admiral Farit, who got the news, looked into the distance with some fascination. What's the trouble? Colonel Dolkovas, the liaison officer who had been following the admiral, asked nervously. Now Warsaw faces a direct threat from the Soviet-Russian army, and we must hold Warsaw before we have any hope of winning. Farit explained to the liaison officer beside him. His Excellency the Admiral really has a brilliant eye, and he can see the key points of the current battle situation at a glance. Now Soviet Russia and Poland are like two people wrestling, and both find each other's weaknesses, but they must first withstand the pressure of each other before they can attack the weaknesses. And the common weakness of the two is Warsaw. Whoever controls Warsaw will take the initiative. And Piłsudski certainly knew this, so he prepared a garrison of nearly 100,000 people in Warsaw. 80,000 of them were deployed at the bridgehead east of the Vistula River. In addition, in order to enhance the firepower of the defenders, he also strengthened more than 360 artillery pieces here, which is bound to be made into steel. Although Piłsudski tried his best to increase the strength of Warsaw's frontal forces, Tukhachevsky was not a vegetarian. As long as the 4th and 15th armies crossed the Vistula River, the defenders of Warsaw would become turtles in the urn. On the Vistula line, Soviet-Russian soldiers launched a fierce attack on the Polish 5th Army who were defending here. Located in block 32 kilometers west of Warsaw, there is a road bridge connecting the Vistula River. This is also the situation in which Warsaw faces a three-sided siege, as long as the western gate of Warsaw falls here. And more importantly, there is a railway from Warsaw connecting Poznan and Gdańsk 5 kilometers away. At present, the aid of Britain and France to Poland needs to be transported to Warsaw through this railway, which can also be said to be the lifeline of Poland at present. Therefore, the Soviet-Russian army attacked Plock the most violently, and General Sikorski, the commander of the Polish 5th Army, also set up his headquarters here. Attack under the command of the commander. Soviet-Russian soldiers launched an attack on Plock. Fire and hit them back. Seeing that the Soviet Union launched an attack, the Soviet-Russian soldiers who were attacking the Polish defenders immediately shot. For a time, bullets flew all over the battlefield, and every moment someone fell. The Soviet-Russian commander looked at the soldiers who were constantly being hit, and did not change his face, and with a big hand, waved. A new batch of soldiers joined the battlefield. For an army with a large number of supporting weapons like Germany or Romania, the superimposed attack method of the Soviet Union has little effect, because they have many ways to cause reinforcement to feel too much damage on the front line, and their effect is greatly reduced. And for the Polish army, this method is really terrible. Because most of their soldiers have only been trained for a few months, and some are even less than a month. Even if the weapons given by Britain and France are too many, it is useless if they are not used well. So in the face of Soviet Russia's Civil War tested offensive method, the Polish army was blinded. Relying on the numerical advantage, the Soviet-Russian soldiers advanced step by step to the position point. After finally arriving at the charging position, with the command of the leading officer, the Soviet-Russian soldiers jumped up and rushed to the position point. Not good. General Sikorski, who was observing the battle, said in a secret voice, and immediately order the reserves to go to the front line and drive them out. With the commanders' order, 3 regiments of Polish troops rushed to the battlefield. And a fight is unfolding on the ground. Kill. A Polish soldier rushed towards a Soviet-Russian soldier who was rushing into the position beside him, taking advantage of the enemy's unsteady footing and stabbing the opponent with a stab. In the face of the thrust of the Polish soldiers, the Soviet-Russian soldiers, who had not yet stood firm, had no choice but to watch the opponent stab themselves down. It was rare to see a situation like this Polish soldier on the position, and it was more that several Soviet and Russian soldiers rushed into the position in cooperation with each other. In the face of these Soviet-Russian soldiers who had experienced many battles, the Polish soldiers who lacked combat experience were unable to resist and could only retreat, and the position was in danger of being captured by the enemy. Fortunately, the arrival of reinforcement dashed Subo's attempt to seize the position in one fell swoop. Looking at the retreating Soviet-Russian army, General Sikorsky put down the big stone in his heart. The 5th Corps he commanded had suffered great losses from the attack of the Soviet-Russian army before, and the army had replenished too many new recruits. The time to defend the Vistula River was short, and it was too late to train these recruits. Therefore, in his plan, he intends to let these troops with more recruits feel the atmosphere of the battlefield. Who knew that the Soviet and Russian troops did not try to attack at first, but instead launched a direct onslaught, which almost made him capsize in the gutter. It seems that the previous plan can no longer be used, and he feels some subtle changes from the offensive of the Soviet-Russian army. But what it is still unknown. Still, he decided to inform Piłsudski of the situation in Warsaw, which might help him. But next, he needs to defend the defensive line, and cannot let them threaten the rear of Warsaw. Chapter 470 Battle of Warsaw 3. When the 4th and 15th Armies launched a fierce attack on the Vistula line, Warsaw also encountered the attack of the Soviet army. The bridgehead on the east side of the Vistula River is facing the siege of the Soviet army. The Soviet Union's 3rd, 12th, and 16th Army groups are attacking it from the east and south respectively. Boom, boom, boom. Diffuse gunpowder smoke and flying dust shrouded the position, choking people uncomfortable. From time to time, buildings hit by large caliber artillery shells become torn apart, accompanied by screams. Even the fortifications in front of them make people feel uneasy. After finally surviving the shelling, the Polish soldiers who had been living through the years finally breathed a sigh of relief. Even in the face of the enemy, it is better than the hard shelling. At least the fate will be in your hands. Sure enough, as they wished, the enemy attacked, making their hands and feet more agile. The Polish soldiers who were driven out of the artillery fortifications immediately prepared themselves by relying on the terrain. You said, why don't you hide in the fortifications? If you call that pile of blasted dirt a fortification, then you can point. They waited patiently for the arrival of the enemy, and it would have been better if they had a cigarette. Without letting them wait any longer, black Soviet soldiers appeared in front of them. The familiar battle is about to start again, but this time I don't know how many familiar people can't wait for the battle to end. In the headquarters, Piłsudski and General Zeligowski, who commanded the bridgehead, watched the battle. After putting down his binoculars, Piłsudski praised, "The boys played well, better than I expected." It all depends on the material guarantee of the National Defense Council. Soldiers can fight with peace of mind. In the face of Piłsudski's praise, General Zeligowski, the commander, gave the other side a little flattery. After all, everyone knows that Piłsudski is the leader of the National Defense Committee. To say that it depends on the guarantee of the National Defense Committee is to say that Piłsudski has a good leadership. Facing General Zeligowski's little praise, Piłsudski was not complacent. Instead, he said, "As long as the boys continue to fight like this, then my next plan will be able to unfold smoothly." Faced with Piłsudski's plan, General Zeligowski did not interject to ask, because he knew that, if he wanted to inform him, he did not need to ask more. General Zeligowski's performance made Piłsudski very satisfied. Patience has always been a soldier's virtue. Only a serious opponent can make mistakes, and Piłsudski has always agreed on this point. However, the next plan requires the cooperation of General Zeligowski. So he told his plan. The next plan, this is what I plan to do. Because our troops are mainly concentrated on the south bank of the Vistula River, and on the opposite bank there are the enemy's newly arrived 11th and 14th Armies and the 1st Cavalry Army. I plan to concentrate on the enemy. In this unit, the 3rd Corps cooperated with the Romanian reinforcement to complete this task. At the same time, after the start of the battle, with the 2nd and 4th Corps as the flanks and the Assault Corps as a corps, it moved quickly from the direction of the town of Galva into the direction of Sedus. Charge forward and fight until the city is taken. Piłsudski took a sip from the water glass and added, this is the first phase of the battle plan. The first stage. Yes, the first stage. General Zeligowski knew about the assault corps, a newly formed corps, Polish, Grupa Uderzynowa, which consisted of only 30,000 soldiers, but was composed of the most determined and capable soldiers, who also use the most advanced weapons, are equipped with more than 700 machine guns alone. This is also the most elite unit in Poland at present. It has been held by Piłsudski all the time. I didn't expect it to be used at this time. I saw Piłsudski put down the water glass and continued, if both combat objectives are met, then the Third Army needs to rush to Siedlce. The Ger River prevented the enemy from breaking through. The assault corps continued to march towards the East Prussian border, completely blocking the possibility of the enemy escaping. As for the Romanian reinforcement, I have already discussed with Admiral Ferit of the unit, and they will send Brest attack, take such key cities, and defend against enemy reinforcement. After speaking, Piłsudski asked another question. Do you know your mission? No. General Zeligowski replied, I need to hold back the enemy and not let them evacuate easily. That's right. Now Piłsudski's intentions have been fully revealed to General Zeligowski. The Polish army commander intends to completely surround the 3rd, 12th, and 16th armies of Soviet Russia in Warsaw and the 4th and 15th armies on the east bank of the Vistula River. This is the strength of 400,000 troops of the 5 army groups. I didn't expect him to have such a good appetite. If it does come to fruition, it will be a huge victory that will go down in history. However, General Zeligowski was not carried away by this possible future outcome. Instead, he thought of the most important difficulty. Your Excellency, other aspects are easy to say, but will they make up their minds to let the Romanian reinforcement capture Brest and hold it here? To know that, if this encirclement is really achieved, the Soviet Union will spare no expense to save the siege. If there are casualties among them, no small, if they back down, then the siege will be broken. Piłsudski was not irritated by General Zeligowski's questioning of the plan, but looked at him with relief. So he answered the question. You can rest assured on this point, the Romanian army will definitely defend Brest, because this is also the order of their king. Piłsudski's answer made General Zeligowski even more puzzled, but he knew that, if Piłsudski didn't plan to tell himself, it was better not to ask. In fact, in Piłsudski's heart, he was also bleeding for the price of keeping the Romanian army in Brest. A tariff of 8%, which is the price of having Edel ordered to stick to Brest. Piłsudski is also working hard to achieve maximum results, but he thinks everything is worth it. If Poland is occupied by Soviet Russia, all conditions will be in vain. As long as he can keep Poland's independence and obtain the greatest benefit for future negotiations with Soviet Russia, not to mention the 8% tariff, as long as it does not touch Poland's core interests, he will agree. In this respect, Piłsudski is also a gambler. He is gambling with economic interests to gain space for the people of the country. The next step is to need the military of both countries to fight for this plan. Chapter 471 Tank and Cavalry Battle 1. August 16th was the launch day of the Piłsudski plan, and the Romanian army under the command of Admiral Ferit was already ready. With the help of the Poles, he also knew the enemy's position very well. After all, this is the innate advantage of Poland's local intelligence. According to the information available, Admiral Ferit already knew that the Soviet Russian 11th and 14th armies were located on the Demblin-Parkev line, protecting not only the flanks of the Soviet Russian army besieging Warsaw, but also its rear and supply line safety point. In order to deal with the deployment of Soviet Russia, Admiral Ferit made the following arrangements. The 3rd, 7th, 12th, and 19th divisions were the left-wing corps under his personal command, and two heavy artillery regiments were attached to target the enemy 14th army on the front line of Parkev. The 5th, 9th, 18th, and Polish 3rd Corps are the right-wing corps, with Lieutenant General Mandiv as the commander and General Smigwy as the deputy commander, the Polish 3rd Corps commander, and is assigned a heavy artillery regiment to deal with the enemy's 11th Army in the Demblin line. As for the remaining cavalry divisions and armored brigades as mobile corps, they will face new enemies that may appear at any time. The new enemy mentioned here can only be the 1st Army of the Russian cavalry. On the vast plains of Poland, the role of cavalry need not be said. That's why Admiral Ferit brought the cavalry division and the armored brigade. He hoped that this unit would be able to deal heavy damage to the cavalry of the Soviet Union. In fact, after the Romanian military seized western Ukraine, they expressed concern about the vast plain terrain of the new territory, and many of them suggested the formation of new cavalry divisions to deal with national defense pressure. However, their proposal was suppressed by Ploiesti and other military leaders, but the number of cavalry divisions was expanded. At present, the Romanian Cavalry Division adopts a large organization. The cavalry division has 3 cavalry regiments, one of which is a mounted infantry regiment, a cavalry regiment. It is said that the cavalry artillery is actually a towed artillery transported by vehicles, and a transport regiment, the largest organization, the Division Transport Regiment, an engineer battalion, in addition to a divisional guard company, a communications platoon, a field hospital, a veterinary team, a chaplain, etc. The cavalry regiment consisted of 3 cavalry battalions and 1 cannon battalion. Each cavalry battalion has 4 cavalry companies and 1 machine gun company, and each cavalry company has 114 officers and soldiers. The entire division has a staff of more than 13,000 people, which is comparable to the 2 half cavalry divisions of Soviet Russia. So don't look at Romania as a cavalry division. Its strength is not weak at all. But not to mention the armored brigade accompanied by the cavalry nemesis, which is enough to deal with the 1st Soviet Russian Cavalry Army commanded by General Budani. So in the early morning of the 16th, the Romanian army launched a fierce attack on the Soviet Russian army on the Demblin-Parkev line. Still familiar with the artillery opening, the 3 heavy artillery regiments took the lead in firing as the core of fire support. Maybe more than 100 heavy artillery with a caliber of 150 or more are not conspicuous on the front line of more than 30 kilometers. But how can Admiral Ferit distribute the artillery equally? He concentrated the artillery. They bombarded several predetermined breaches violently. At the same time, when the heavy artillery extended to the rear, the artillery attached to each division bombarded it again. As an old opponent of the Romanian army, the 14th Army also suffered great losses in the Battle of Vinnitsa, so they, led by Commander Smerga, took full advantage of the terrain and fortifications to avoid Romanian artillery. But there are exceptions to everything. Don't run around. Hurry up and hide. A Soviet Russian officer was yelling at a recruit who couldn't stand the heavy artillery fire. The Soviet Russian soldier was panic stricken by the shelling. His face was pale, and he ran around the field like a headless fly. He just wanted to find a place where there was no explosion to hide. At this time, a shell exploded near him, and the soldier arrived without a word. Hazying the soldier's sacrifice, the officer sighed. Then he turned his head and yelled at the other soldiers, "If you see it, this is the end of running around. If you encounter shelling, don't run." Listening to the officer's roar, the recruits in the team nodded to indicate that they knew. The 14th Army, which suffered huge losses in the Battle of Vinnitsa, had such a situation because too many new recruits were replenished. Therefore, its actual combat capability is much weaker than before. There is always a time to stop the shelling, not to mention that Romania is just a pseudo power, and the shells also cost money. So after 3 hours of bombardment, the shelling stopped. When the shelling stopped, the officers of the 14th Army jumped up, as if they had been kicked in the buttocks. Hurry up and go out. The enemy is attacking. Some officers even thought the soldiers were slow to respond, and even kicked them in the buttocks. There is also a reason for these officers to rush the soldiers quickly. They fought with the Romanian army before, and their soldiers were almost touching their positions after the shelling ended. How can such an excellent combination of infantry and artillery not be impressive? After the soldiers were driven to the position, it turned out that the Romanian who was attacking was less than 300 meters away from him, which surprised many soldiers who were fighting with the Romanian army for the first time. Fire quickly. Don't let the enemy get close to the position. With the roar of the officer, the Soviet Russian soldiers on the position immediately shot at the attacking Romanian soldiers with their weapons, trying to intercept the opponent in front of the position. Of course, the attacking Romanian army would not let the other party do as he wished, and exchanged fire with the Soviet Russian soldiers with the weapons in their hands. For a time, the two armies shot at a distance of 200 or 300 meters behind the front line. The commander of the 14th Army, Smilga, was observing the situation on the battlefield. He couldn't help but care. He had already tried the attack power of the Romanian army, and this time facing the Romanian attack, Smilga was a little worried about his troops. In his observation, the soldiers on the Soviet-Russian positions were gradually suppressed by the Romanian soldiers. Many soldiers on the position were hit and fell into the trenches, and the Romanian soldiers were gradually approaching the position within 100 meters. 100 meters is a dangerous distance for the positional defender. This distance is already the final charge distance in the Soviet-Russian infantry code of practice. According to Soviet-Russian practice, at this time everyone needs to stand up and rush to the position at the fastest speed point. So seeing the danger of being dashed into the position by the Romanians, Smilga immediately gave the order the 38th Division to send a brigade to reinforce the frontline positions immediately and make them move faster. The Soviet reinforcement were quick, and they rushed into the position against the artillery fire. After receiving reinforcement, the firepower density of the first line positions increased greatly, and the Romanian offensive was beaten back. Seeing the soldiers cheering for repulsing the enemy, Smilga felt a little uncomfortable. The enemy let himself send reinforcement for the first time, and the next battle will be very difficult. At this time, requesting reinforcement is within his consideration point at present. Only the 1st Army of Cavalry under the command of General Budiani can provide reinforcement, so Smilga's telegram for assistance was sent to General Budiani. Chapter 470 to Tank and Cavalry Battle, Part 2. When Smilga's telegram for help appeared in the hands of General Budiani, the genius cavalry general immediately felt a sense of danger. So he reported to Tukhachevsky, who was far away in Minsk, while preparing for the rescue point. As a superb general who used cavalry, Budiani certainly wouldn't just send troops to reinforce the Demblin-Pulchev front line. His troops are cavalry. If they go to serve as infantry, how is this possible? Budiani had his own plan, that is, to bypass the enemy's front line, disrupt the opponent's supply line in the rear, and attack the opponent's towns and traffic points in multiple places, forcing the opponent to go out and reduce the pressure on the front line of the Soviet-Russian army. It can be said responsibly that Budiani's plan is worthy of the title of his genius cavalry general, and his ability to use cavalry to fight in this way has a lot to do with serving in the cavalry unit for many years. Born into a poor peasant family in the village of Kajilin, Rostov region, Budiani was drafted in 1903 to become a young cavalry soldier that young people are proud of. He then participated in the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, and after the war was sent to study at the St. Petersburg Cavalry School. In the cavalry school, Budiani acquired a systematic knowledge of the use of cavalry and laid the foundation for his future illustrious military exploits. After graduating from cavalry school, he returned to the dragoons after the outbreak of the First World War. He fought in Poland, Germany, Austria and the Caucasus. After the Russian Revolution, Budiani was elected vice chairman of the Division Soldiers Committee. During his garrison in Minsk, he met Franz, who had a major influence on the formation of Budiani's worldview and the choice of his life path. Finally, after the August Revolution led by Lenin broke out, Budiani returned to his hometown. When the Civil War broke out, he formed a cavalry guerrilla in his hometown, and then expanded all the way to a cavalry brigade. In the Battle of Tsaritsyn, Budiani commanded a cavalry brigade to beat the enemy to pieces, showing the ability of an outstanding cavalry commander, and won the appreciation of Stalin, the top leader of the Communist Party stationed in the Tsaritsyn area, and was awarded the Order of the Red Banner. The troop was also expanded into the 1st Cavalry Corps. As the commander, he was the commander of the army, along with the military and political commissar Voroshilov, the artillery chief Kulik, and he also had division commanders Timoshenko, Rokossovsky, and regiment commanders Zhukov. The famous future marshal. Later, he commanded the 1st Cavalry Army and made great achievements in the Civil War. At the same time, the army was expanded into the 1st Cavalry Army. He also became one of the famous generals during the Civil War. So after Budiani made his deployment, he immediately took his soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Army and marched towards Fivodova. It was 20 kilometers away from the 14th Army in Kharkiv, enough for him to bypass the enemy. and it is only 30 kilometers away from Lublin, which just forms a triangle between the two places. Whether he's making a gesture to attack Lublin or harassing supply lines, it's the perfect location point. As soon as he was ready, Budyonny ordered his troops to move towards Feudora Point. Large-scale army marches are completely impossible to deceive, especially cavalry marches. Don't think that the cavalry marches to ride on horses and leave, and items such as ammunition, rations, and feed need to be transferred. In particular, rations for horses are indispensable. You must know that horses need to eat grains such as oats, soybeans, salt, etc. in wartime, and they must not eat less, otherwise they will look good on the battlefield. Every minute point. Horse is also a very delicate animal. You can't starve to make it sick. Don't look at the cavalry as very glamorous. In fact, every day you need to promote feelings with your partner, help it clean its body, brush horsehair and other tedious things. So, when Budyonny moved to Feudora, he was immediately discovered by the Polish side. Knowing that this was Polish territory, and Admiral Friet immediately recruited Lieutenant General Wydrzyk and Major General Hoffman, and he pointed to the map and asked them, now the enemy cavalry army is moving towards my rear. Do you know your mission? I know. Clearly. Admiral Friet waved his hand and said, now that you know it, let's do it. Then the two of them were sent to prepare. Of course, the two who walked out of the headquarters will not just leave like this. They also need to discuss the cooperation of the troops marching, and cooperation. Major General Hoffman, why don't you come and sit with me? That's disturbing. In the face of the invitation of the veteran Lieutenant General Wojtczyk, Major General Hoffman will of course not refuse to accept it. While Hoffman was a major, Wojtczyk was already a major general. It is rude to say that, while Hoffman was still wearing open crotch pants, Wydrzyk had already joined the army. Wojtczyk is not much younger than Pulishan, and respect for seniors is also quite common in the army. Returning to the temporary residence of Lieutenant General Wojtczyk, the old Lieutenant General immediately said, what do you think about this battle? I wonder what your excellency Lieutenant General thinks. In the face of Lieutenant General Wydrzyk's inquiry, Hoffman needs to listen to his opinion first. Hearing Hoffman's words, Lieutenant General Wojtczyk said immediately, I think so. In the old Lieutenant General's account, Hoffman finally understood his plan. The cavalry divisions were the lead and bait, to lure the opposing cavalry armies to attack, and then the armored brigade joined the battlefield as the decisive force, to crush the enemy. That's right. In Wydrzyk's view, it's not enough to drive the enemy cavalry army away. It would be very uncomfortable for tens of thousands of cavalry to hang behind them, which would not only affect the current battle, but also threaten their next plan to capture Brest. So it's best to defeat it, so that it no longer threatens the rear supply line. You must know that the Romanian army is currently very dependent on supply lines, and many weapons and equipment in the army cannot leave the supply point. After Lieutenant General Wojtczyk finished speaking, Hoffman asked the key question. Your Excellency, how to lure the other party to take the bait? In the face of Hoffman's inquiry, Lieutenant General Wojtczyk immediately gave the answer. I plan to move here and try to lure the opponent to attack. Hoffman followed the hand of His Excellency the Lieutenant General, and the hill marked of it on the map was his chosen target. This hill is 16 kilometers away from Parkev and 27 kilometers away from Lublin, and happens to stand in front of Feudora. It's just that the two didn't know that the opponent's target was Feudora. What if the opponent doesn't attack? Lieutenant General Wojtczyk shrugged and replied, then I can only continue to respond according to the opponent's marching line. Anyway, their goal must be our supply line, and it will not be too far from this destination. And it depends on how did the generals fight. Faced with the old Lieutenant General's answer, Hoffman didn't know how to answer. In fact, Lieutenant General Wojtczyk is correct, because cavalry is different from infantry, and fast maneuvering is the core of cavalry. At present, the Romanian cavalry is at a disadvantage, and the chances of winning by taking the initiative are too small, and if they bring an armored brigade, their opponents are not fools, and will not fight with them. After all, tanks are not unfamiliar to Soviet Russia. The completely brown sugar style of play made Lieutenant General Wojtczyk only this choice. The two finally negotiated the distance between the armored brigade and the cavalry division, as well as the shielding of the battlefield. strive to ensure that the opponent cannot find the big killer behind the cavalry division, as well as the tank point. After all the issues were discussed, Lieutenant General Wydrichy immediately set off with the cavalry division, and Hoffman followed behind him slowly. They waited for the Soviet Russian cavalry to be tempted to swallow this poisonous bait. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 473, Cavalry Battle Tanks, Part 2. Today, the town of Włodawa is full of people, and the local Polish residents are hiding in their houses to watch the uninvited guests pouring in. At this time, a large group of cavalry escorted a few people into the town that had long been controlled, and the Polish residents found from the crack of the door that among these people, a middle-aged cavalryman in his 30s and 40s was the main one. This is the town of Włodawa, no different from other Polish towns. While watching the layout of the town, Budyani, who was riding on a horse, made a secret evaluation point just here. A messenger ran up to him and reported, "Commander, the headquarters has been set up." Budyani, who was looking bored, replied, "Okay, let's go." So a large group of cavalry immediately rushed to the new headquarters under the leadership of the messengers. This headquarters is built in a villa next to the town, which is the most luxurious house in the town. It also lives in the richest man in the town, but the family has since been evicted from the villa. As soon as Budyani came to the headquarters, he saw the entry and exit here. Everyone was busy moving and the items needed by the headquarters, and outside the villa, the original owner's luxury furniture and other items could be seen casually throw away in a corner. Budyani walked into the villa and found that the political commissar Voroshilov was instructing these people to place items. When he saw Budyani walk in, he greeted him warmly. "Comrade Budyani, here you are." Budyani nodded and responded to Voroshilov, "Yes, Comrade Commissar, I'm here. How is the current situation?" "It's not bad. The place is spacious and suitable for headquarters." After hearing Voroshilov's answer, Budyani said with a smile, "It seems that I can have a good rest today." "That's right. I really need to give the troops a break. After rushing for 2 days." It needs to be said here that both Budyani and Voroshilov belong to the military opposition, and their leader is Comrade Stalin, who has been transferred back to Moscow. Trotsky and Tukhachevsky formed a military faction. At present, the opposition in the Soviet Russian army is in a state of being suppressed, which also leaves hidden dangers for the future. Just as the two were talking, a messenger hurried in. When the two saw the messenger running in, they felt that something must have happened, and Voroshilov, who was impatient, immediately asked, "What's the matter?" "Report to the commander and commissar. We found a large group of Romanian cavalry 13 kilometers away." Hearing the report of the messenger, the two of them flashed a sentence in their minds, which came very quickly. They were mentally prepared for the arrival of the Romanian army, but they did not expect it to come so quickly. And at this time they thought about the warning that Comrade Stalin had given them earlier. The Romanian army cannot be treated as the white guard of the civil war, otherwise it will suffer a great loss. It should be treated as the German army. They didn't know much about Stalin's warning before, and now they can see the opponent's unusualness from the reaction and actions of the opponent. As for the impatient Voroshilov, he immediately asked, "How many are there here?" "About 13,000. 4,000 cavalry troops. We don't know if there are troops behind. The main reason is that they did a good job of covering up, and we couldn't go around and investigate." At this time, Budyani suddenly said, "We must find out what is behind the enemy's cavalry, and we must find out at all costs." So under Budyani's order, a group of Soviet Russian cavalry units were sent out, and they fought in the field with the Romanian cavalry covering the flanks. "Come on, take down these Romanian gangsters." A Soviet Russian cavalry officer commanded his subordinates and rushed towards a group of Romanian cavalry that appeared. Give these Russians some color. And this team of Romanian cavalry was also unambiguous, and under the command of the officer who led the team also rushed towards the Soviet Russian cavalry. So the cavalry troops on both sides rushed towards the opponent, relying on the superiority of numbers on the one hand and the superiority of weapons on the other. and they all rushed to the opponent fearlessly. Point kill. The two troops that collided together immediately presented a scene of overturning. The soldiers on both sides, ignoring their comrades who were shot down, waved their sabers at the opponent. After a short and bloody confrontation, the soldiers and war horses who fell in a pool of blood on the battlefield spoke of the cruelty. Many soldiers were killed in the battle, and the two sides turned their horses to look at their opponents. It was obvious that there must be a winner in this fight. And battles like this continue to take place in the wilderness, which also makes Lieutenant General Wiedrashi secretly distressed. However, in order to win the victory, the old general did not care about the casualties of his subordinates, and he continued to send troops again and again to intercept the Soviet Russian cavalry who were trying to pass them. However, manpower is always poor at times, and the number of Soviet Russian cavalry is more than double his. There were still many Soviet Russian cavalrymen who escaped the interception and probed behind the cavalry division. In an open space, surrounded by unknown woods behind the cavalry division, jackals were parked here in disguise. In the woods, Major General Hoffman, like other soldiers, was wearing a camouflaged military uniform and was observing the Soviet Russian cavalry outside the woods with a telescope. This is the third batch of Soviet Russian scout cavalry today, but they can't find us. Colonel Antonescu next to him whispered to Hoffman. I hope so. Hoffman looked at the cavalry outside and replied casually, if they come in, they will trouble your cavalry for a while, and they must not be allowed to escape. Don't worry, I know what to do. Maybe they will go to the warehouse in a while. Isn't that the case with the two cavalry before? Facing Hoffman's words, Antonescu answered nonchalantly. After he finished speaking, he looked at Hoffman with envy, and neither did the youngest Major General. At that time, after Hoffman discussed with Lieutenant General Wiedrashi, he felt that it was not safe to rely on cavalry to cover the battlefield. So let the old general send cavalry to protect himself, and in addition to this, he also set up several well-defended warehouses. These depots only have some weapons, ammunition, and vehicles, but some cavalry troops are closely guarded around them. And the cavalry regiment of Antonescu, who is his friend, was sent to perform this task. Now this friend is staying by his side, under the pretense that he needs to protect the armored brigade from being discovered. And the establishment of these measures is not wrong. From yesterday, a large number of Soviet Russian cavalry broke through the interception of the cavalry division. Fortunately, the armored brigade had been camouflaged in advance, so they were not discovered. However, several warehouses that have been set up have been discovered, and the Romanian cavalry guarding here has already dealt with these Soviet Russian cavalry. Last night they heard a loud explosion, and it seemed that a warehouse was destroyed by the enemy. The two watched as the group of Soviet Russian soldiers dismounted outside the woods and looked at them as if they were planning to go into the woods to explore. Seeing that these Russian cavalrymen were planning to enter the woods, Hoffman couldn't help but say, "Damn, they seem to be coming in." Antonescu asked your people to prepare, don't let them run away. Antonescu, who also saw this situation, also replied with a serious expression, I will prepare now, and I will not let them run away. Just as these Soviet Russian soldiers dismounted and prepared to enter the woods with their weapons, a cavalryman from a distance ran towards them. And these soldiers also found the cavalry and saw that they stopped planning to enter the woods and watched the cavalry run in front of them. While pointing in a certain direction, he spoke to these people, and the Soviet Russian soldiers who listened to him immediately got on their horses and followed him to the place. Although I couldn't hear what they said from a distance, Antonescu also guessed the content with the direction of the action. He smiled and said to Hoffman, we are so lucky that another warehouse has been discovered. It's a good discovery. After several attempts to save the day, the Soviet Russian cavalry was decreasing day by day. None of the warehouses established were preserved, and they all fell under the frenzied attacks of these Soviet Russian cavalry. Antonescu and Hoffman listened to Thunderbolt several times when the scout cavalry of the Soviet Union reported the information to Budyani. Budyani immediately laughed. It seems that the Romanian cavalry division on the opposite side is using the old strategy of setting up suspicions and retreating while fighting. Then what should we do? Voroshilov, who was inferior to Budyani militarily, immediately asked. In the face of his political commissars. Question, Budyani said with a smile, since I have seen through it, then I will cripple them. and it will just relieve the pressure on Smerga and the others. Thinking of Smerga's urging telegram, Voroshilov nodded and replied, "Alright, let these Romanians know how powerful the Red Army is, so they don't get too complacent." So under the command of the two men, after the 1st Cavalry Army Group left a regiment to guard Feodora, the other troops immediately pressed on Lieutenant General Whiteshe. In the face of the pressure of the Soviet-Russian cavalry, Lieutenant General Wiedesky immediately took back all the troops he sent, and the hill of Ovitz, which was 200 or 300 meters higher than the surrounding area, became his headquarters. And Budani didn't give the old general much time to prepare, and made the decision in the morning. His troops arrived here at noon. Looking at the densely packed cavalry wearing the military caps named after Budani in the future, Lieutenant General Wiedesky knew that the strategy was successful, and then he needed to hold on until the arrival of the Hoffman Armored Brigade. To be victorious, Budani watched the cavalry division's defense from a distance, because the arrival time was short, and a ditch that was hastily dug to less than half a person's height appeared in front of him. There were only a few fortifications made up of earthen bags, but it was his idea, because there were artillery pieces behind the fortifications. Looking at the damp soil that was dug out, Budani felt that the odds of winning were better. While he was observing, the artillery of the cavalry army had already been unloaded, and the artillery was fiddling with the artillery to prepare for fire support for a while. Even soldiers with low military capability can see the haste of the fortifications prepared on the opposite side, which makes them even more morale, and attacking such opponents is their favorite thing to do. The preparation time is not long. The cavalry with the artillery is lighter, which is convenient for deployment, and Budani waved his hand when he saw that it was almost the same. Thus began the Battle of Ovitz. Chapter 474 Cavalry Battle Tanks. End. Boom, boom, boom. The light artillery blasted violently towards the cavalry division's position, and the artillery on the position also launched a counter-attack. The artillery of the two sides is much less than that of the Demblin-Parkev line, but the lethality can be not small. Here Romania destroyed a Soviet-Russian artillery, causing a lot of casualties among the soldiers around, while the Soviet-Russian artillery over there killed a Romanian artillery, allowing the sound of looting explosions to spread over the artillery positions. When the artillery on both sides aimed at the opponent, the dismounted Soviet soldiers rushed to the position with their weapons. They were about to seize Romanian positions and open the door to victory. Machine gun fire. The Romanian soldiers did not get close to the Russian soldiers this time, and when they were still 500 or 600 meters away, the defensive machine guns fired at these soldiers. The attacking Soviet-Russian soldiers were also unequivocal. They took out their cart machine guns and opened fire on the positions. This setup of mounting the machine gun on the cart was originally used by the Cossacks in order to facilitate the movement of the cavalry. The Soviet-Russian cavalry also learned this trick and also developed a tactic of large carts with machine guns to cover the soldiers' attack. First of all, you need a sturdy cart and set up an iron plate on it as a shelter. Then the machine gun is set up on it and it is pushed forward by manpower or charged force as a cover fire. One advantage of this design is that there is no need to follow the attacking troops with machine guns, and not only need to be re-erected, but also need to find cover. This cart machine gun comes with a bunker, and this bunker has been specially reinforced. However, there are also disadvantages. That is, the large area is easy to be called by the opponent's artillery, and it is not suitable for combat with complex terrain. Obviously the current battle, it can be said that the terrain is very suitable for such a large car machine gun. The appearance of this kind of large truck machine guns has attracted some Romanian shelling, and many large trucks have been named. In the face of this loss, Budani was not angry but happy. This shows that the Romanian position has no extra artillery, so what are you waiting for if you don't increase the investment of troops at this time? Following his order, another two regiments of Soviet-Russian soldiers attacked the position with weapons. In the face of the Soviet Union's increase in troops, the pressure on the frontline positions increased immediately. And Lieutenant General Wiedesky, who was watching all this, did not increase his troops. He had to let Soviet Russia see the hope of victory in order to gain greater victory for the arrival of the armored brigade. However, this suffered the Romanian soldiers on the front line. They fought back against their opponents with difficulty under the attack of several times the number of Soviet Russian soldiers on both sides fell every moment, and it was time to test the soldiers on the front line. Point, you guys go to the left row for support. Point, a Romanian officer loudly gave orders to several soldiers, we are going right now. Point, the soldiers who had just fired bullets at the enemy immediately grabbed their weapons and rushed to the left with their waists down. Point, first platoon leader, we are here to reinforce you. Point, the soldiers who rushed to the left flank said loudly to a non-commissioned officer with the rank of sergeant. Point, the leader of the platoon, who was shooting at the enemy with guns, told them without looking back, find your own position to shoot. Point, just as he was talking, a soldier beside him collapsed into the field with his neck covered, and the platoon leader immediately leaned down and looked over. The soldiers couldn't hold it at all, and the blood was gushing out. The platoon leader took out the gauze and hurried him to hold it down, and then continued to use his hands full of blood from his comrades to pick up weapons and shoot at the attacking enemy. Point, he knew the soldier's name, and he knew how many people there were in his family. But now he is just a wounded soldier. Whether he can survive and wait for the arrival of the medics can only depend on his luck. No crying, no sad expressions, and no tears. This is war. Just so ruthless scenes like this happen all the time. Every soldier is not only fighting for the country, but also for his own survival. In the hands of Edel Hohenzollern, they are one of the numbers on the report. Just like Lenin and others, read the Soviet Russian casualty report. Point, although the soldiers on the position were fighting fiercely, the Soviet Russian soldiers still prevailed by virtue of their superiority in numbers and firepower. They slowly but firmly attacked the Romanian position. After a distance of almost 100 meters, the Soviet Russian soldiers jumped up and charged the position with the slogan of Allah. The Romanian soldiers, relying on the terrain, immediately mounted their bayonets and welcomed the next hand-to-hand battle. Point, after seeing his soldiers attack the position, Budiani immediately sent a third wave of reinforcement in the face of the fierce attack of the Soviet Union. Lieutenant General Ploiesti arranged a second line position on the one hand and prayed in his heart on the one hand Hoffman should come earlier, or he would suffer a great loss. And Hoffman, who was remembered by Lieutenant General Ploiesti, was actually near the battlefield, and even the sound of guns on the battlefield could be heard. But Hoffman didn't plan to rush straight ahead like this. Instead, he planned to bypass the battlefield and attack the enemy from behind. Point, to this end, he also found Antonescu to discuss his idea, and Antonescu is also a daring guy. After hearing about the best possible results, he did not care about the safety of his immediate superior, Lieutenant General Ploiesti, and instead fully supported Hoffman's plan. Point, so when Lieutenant General Ploiesti was struggling to resist the Budiani offensive, the two were rushing back around the battlefield with reinforcement. Among them, Antonescu's cavalry was responsible for driving away the nearby Soviet Russian outposts. Soon the news that a Romanian cavalry was circling behind them reached Budiani. When he learned from the messenger that this was a cavalry force of less than 2,000, he thought it was Budiani, who was about to fight to the death by Lieutenant General Ploiesti, and immediately called Tymoshenko. This future Soviet Russian marshal is serving as a cavalry division commander. You take your troops to kill these Romanian cavalry. Point, as ordered. Comrade commander. Facing Budiani's order, Tymoshenko took the troops on the road immediately after receiving it. Point, in order to prevent accidents, Budiani not only asked Tymoshenko to bring his own cavalry division, but also transferred another cavalry regiment, so that he would face nearly 8,000 cavalry against about 2,000 Romanian cavalry. Even a small discrepancy in the reconnaissance figures is enough to defeat the enemy. Point, so Tymoshenko was full of confidence in defeating this Romanian cavalry. Point, after Budiani ordered Tymoshenko, he immediately increased the attack on the defending Romanian cavalry division. This time, in order to avoid long nights and dreams, he put 20,000 troops into the attack on the enemy's second line positions. Because he always felt that, if the fighting time dragged on, it was estimated that reinforcement from the opponent would arrive. So shortly after the first line position was captured, the battle started again. This time, Budiani wanted to defeat his opponent in the first battle without giving him any chance. Point, as for the cavalry commanded by Tymoshenko, they soon found the Romanian cavalry that was deterring. Seeing that his opponent was only 2,000 cavalry, Timoshenko immediately commanded his troops to entangle his opponent, and nearly 8,000 Soviet Russian cavalry rushed towards the opponent he discovered. In the face of the large-scale Soviet Russian cavalry, Antonescu was not ambiguous, and immediately turned his horse, and led his cavalry, to retreat quickly. Seeing that the opponent wanted to run, how could Brother Timoshen let them wish, and immediately ordered to follow the opponent. The cavalry from both sides chased and fled along the field, which was spectacular. After running for nearly 3 kilometers, a mound appeared, and Antonescu immediately ran towards the mound. Seeing the opponent rushing towards the mound, Timoshen, who was still a little strange, was about to order to stop and take a look when he heard gunshots coming from all sides. His own cavalry fell in pieces, causing Timoshenko to be shocked. At this time, he could only order, rush over quickly. As a qualified cavalry general, Timoshenko had no problem dealing with it. The cavalry is no better than the infantry, and the cavalry that is rushing up cannot stop just like that. Therefore, the response of the cavalry that has already rushed to the attack is to speed up and pass. If they stop, they will be knocked down by the cavalry behind them, which will cause more confusion. Following Timoshenko's orders, the cavalry bravely charged forward. After they plan to rush over, they will hit these sneak attack guys hard. At this moment, the sound of rumbling came from all around, and these firepower points began to move. Armored vehicles, tanks. Looking at the tracked vehicles that were still camouflaged, these 2 words flashed in Timoshenko's mind. No matter what kind it was, at this moment, Brother Timoshen knew that he had been fooled. At this time, he had an idea. He must rush back to report to the commander. This is the enemy's trap. However, with more than 80 tanks in operation, it is difficult to say whether they can be given a chance. Under the command of Hoffman, these monster guns fired in unison, constantly reaping the lives of the Soviet Russian cavalry. In the face of these monsters with fire, many frightened cavalry forcibly turned their horses. The result of this was very tragic. They were knocked off their horses by the cavalry behind them, and they were trampled by the cavalry behind them, before they could even scream. Timoshenko's eyes were red with grief and anger, watching his subordinates continue to fall under the attack of the enemy's tanks. Many of them followed him and made great achievements against the White Bandit army and died in this unknown place. However, since ancient times, there has been no shortage of bloody men in the army, and some people watched their comrades being knocked down. With red eyes, they pulled out grenades and rushed to these monsters. They planned to use their own lives to drag these monsters that slaughtered their comrades under the infection of these warriors. Many cavalrymen also rushed towards these tank monsters, and the actions of these people are objectively very useful. Many tanks see the cavalry rushing towards them, and they point their guns at these dead soldiers. A group of Soviet Russian dead fell under the gun, but there were still people who continued to charge fearlessly. Finally, someone broke through the blockade and threw the tangled grenades at the tanks, and a violent explosion blew on the tanks. It is good. Many Soviet Russian cavalrymen saw this scene and applauded loudly for their comrades. However, when the smoke cleared, the attacked tanks were unscathed, which made many cavalry feel discouraged. At this time, an officer shouted loudly, "Don't throw it around, blow the tracks." Then another breakthrough cavalry threw bundles of grenades at the track. Boom. After a blast, the tank could only spin in place. After seeing that the attack was effective, many cavalrymen broke through the blockade and threw grenades on the tracks, damaging the tracks of several tanks one after another. In the face of the tanks spinning in place, many cavalrymen climbed on these tanks and threw grenades into the observation holes and hatches, completely scrapping these monsters that killed their comrades. But such a move did nothing but boost the morale of the cavalry on the brink of collapse. After seeing the encounters with the teammates, many tanks began to move closer to each other, and the infantry also began to pay attention to these suicide cavalry. As a result, many cavalry soldiers who were determined to die failed to break through the fire blockade and fell in a pool of blood with their beloved war horses. At the same time, Antonescu also returned to the battlefield with his cavalry troops under the pressure of tanks and cavalry. Nearly 5,000 cavalrymen led by Timoshenko could not see the sun tomorrow. Faced with this situation, Timoshenko shouted that he wanted to rush to the tank and die with the other side. However, under the desperate interception of his subordinates, He could only retreat to the rear, and Hoffman and Antonescu, who defeated Timoshenko's cavalry unit, rushed to the battlefield non-stop. At this time, they have been exposed, and they need to rush to the battlefield as soon as possible. What did you say? The cavalry of the commander of Timoshenko was defeated by the enemy tanks. When Budyonny got the news, his hands and feet went cold, and then he grabbed the collar of the cavalry who reported the news and shouted angrily, "What you said can't be true. You are lying to me." The cavalry in blood was shaky when he was caught by Budyonny. He said in a voice that was about to cry, "Commander, what I said is true. When we were chasing the enemy cavalry, we were ambushed by enemy tanks, and our comrades suffered a massacre. There's nothing I can do about those monsters. My company commander is dead, my platoon leader is dead, and my squad leader is dead. I dragged it to the back, and when I saw something was wrong, I quickly ran back to report." After hearing his explanation, Budyonny continued to roar, "I'm going to kill you, a deserter. You abandoned your comrade in arms." And the political commissar Voroshilov on the side quickly stopped him and said, "Commander, is not the time to worry about this. We need to organize the evacuation immediately." He was talking and suddenly heard a roaring sound, and then his face changed. And Budyonny's face changed greatly at this time. The two hurried out of the tent of the temporary command headquarters and saw enemy tanks and cavalry appearing on the outside of the battlefield. Immediately order the troops to evacuate. Voroshilov yelled at Budyonny eagerly. Budyonny, who was stunned by this scene, said with a wry smile, "It's too late." Sure enough, seeing the appearance of their own reinforcement, the Romanian soldiers who were defending the position rushed out of the position and entangled with the Soviet Russian soldiers whose morale had dropped. Now the soldiers on the front line are completely unable to withdraw, and a collapse is just around the corner. At this time, Voroshilov suddenly ordered the guards, "Take the commander away immediately. We will evacuate here immediately." And Budyonny, who was caught by two guards, reacted at this time. He struggled and yelled, "I can't go. My soldiers are still fighting the enemy. I can't leave them behind. Let me go." Facing the guards' questioning eyes, Voroshilov immediately shouted, "Execute the order." Then two strong guards forced Budyonny to leave, and Voroshilov immediately gave the order, "Order the troops to leave immediately." In his mind, the troops on the front line can only resign themselves to fate. They can run as much as they can. Everything depends on providence. With the withdrawal of Budyonny, Voroshilov and others, the situation of the 1st Cavalry Army collapsed. Almost everyone was running to the rear, and what made them uncomfortable was that they were attacking on foot, and their horses were all in the rear, and Hoffman took his armored brigade across a mountain between them and the horses in the face of the enemy's tank monsters spraying fire. These soldiers have absolutely no way. They organized several attacks and were beaten back. Without war horses, they were destined to be prisoners of Romania. And Antonescu took their cavalry units and was responsible for chasing the remaining Soviet troops that escaped. The number of these troops, who were far ahead of him, was terrifying, and seeing his pursuit, they could only go forward desperately. And Antonescu followed the fleeing cavalry all the way to Fivodova. Considering that my troops are not afraid of the enemy's reaction, they stopped at Feodor. In the end, the largest cavalry battle between Soviet Russia and Romania ended in Romania's victory. In this battle, Romania lost 6,247 people, 3,154 killed, and 3,093 injured, and 17 tanks broken down and could not be repaired, and took 20,000 annihilations, including 14,200 prisoners. Win. And this great victory also marked the annihilation of the last mobile unit on the Soviet-Russian battlefield. In the current Polish battlefield, the role of cavalry is simply irreplaceable. And with the fiasco of the 1st Cavalry Group, the Demblin-Parkev line could no longer hold on. On the 19th, the 14th Army of the Parkev line was the first to be broken through. Then in the afternoon, when the 11th Army learned that Parkev had been breached, it could only retreat to the rear, but Lieutenant General Mandiv, who seized the opportunity, attacked violently and turned into a rout. The Soviet-Russian army on the southern front had been defeated by Romania, and they could only retreat along the road to Belarus. Admiral Ferit commanded the Romanian army to pursue them. and from time to time, good news of the annihilation of the Soviet Russian army came to him. Hands the first phase of Romania's mission has been completed, and his next goal is Brest, a major transportation city. Chapter 475, The Fall of Zedus. While the Romanian army was still fighting on the Demblin-Parkev line, Piłsudski also commanded the Polish army to cross the Vistula River and attack Zedus Point on August 16. The agreed day to launch a counterattack. A large number of Polish soldiers appeared on the Vistula River in the early morning. They quickly put their boats on the riverside, sat on them, and rowed quietly towards the opposite bank. Mosquitoes are biting badly on summer nights, and these soldiers didn't pay attention to it at all, but stared at the opposite side of the river bank point. This river crossing attack first needed to ensure privacy, but it was fortunate that no Soviet soldiers appeared until they landed on the other side point, and General Podolsky, who was in charge of organizing the river crossing, finally breathed a sigh of relief. This was considered a third of success. Immediately afterwards, another group of soldiers appeared by the river with a group of boats, and among these soldiers were many people carrying wooden ropes. This time, crossing the river was a lot more complicated. First, they took the rope from the boat to the other side, then quickly tie the boat into a row with ropes, and then fasten the ropes to both sides of the river. Then they quickly laid out planks, and a simple pontoon bridge was built. The other Polish soldiers immediately boarded the pontoon and crossed the Vistula Point by the early hours of the morning. Dozens of pontoon bridges had been built on this section of the river, 4 of which were large pontoon bridges that could pass heavy weapons such as artillery point overnight. More than 40,000 Polish troops crossed the Vistula River. At this time, the Soviet Union did not know anything about it. Piłsudski, who had such a God-given opportunity, certainly would not sit idly by. After the attacking corps crossed the river, he immediately took the most elite troops in Poland and rushed towards the small town of Galvarin, 12 kilometers away. He had already found out that there was an army of a Soviet Russian division in this small town, and he planned to jump up to give the opponent a surprise blow before the enemy responded. Point as his first target. The 26th Division of the Soviet Union was still in the process of waking up slowly, and the Polish army, which they had no idea about, was already under their noses. So, when Piłsudski's attacking corps arrived like a celestial force around 9 o'clock, the entire force was thrown into chaos. They never dreamed that the Polish army, who was beaten in Warsaw and could not raise its head, would be able to fight back here. Point with the intention to calculate without the intention, plus the military advantage, the outcome is already doomed. The 26th Division of the Soviet Union, stationed in Galvarin, collapsed, and they even abandoned some equipment there. After defeating the Russian troops in Galvarin, Piłsudski's next target was Zedus Point, but this goal is different from Galvarin. Zedus, located on the main road between Warsaw and Minsk, is the material transfer base of the Warsaw army, so the Russian army has been closely guarded. Point there is no possibility of a sneak attack. Moreover, after the defeat of Galvarin, the Russian army of Zedus will inevitably get news, which makes it even more difficult to capture. Point however, Piłsudski would not give up because of difficulties. It was precisely because Zedus was a material transfer base that he needed to capture this important city to paralyze the enemy's 3rd, 12th, and 16th armies outside Warsaw Point. And when Piłsudski captured Galvarin, this shows the disadvantage of Tukhachevsky's headquarters in Minsk. The news that the Polish army had captured Garwolin and marched towards Zedus was not received by Tukhachevsky until the early morning of the 18th. At this time, Piłsudski arrived outside the city of Zedus, and Tukhachevsky was still using outdated information at this time. Point the shortcoming that the headquarters was set up too far and could not control the frontline battle situation at any time made the Soviet army very slow to respond in the face of the counterattack of the Robo coalition. Point however, Tukhachevsky is worthy of being a genius general. He took the intelligence from 2 days ago and immediately discovered the threat facing the Soviet Russian army. It's just that his response turned from one extreme to the other at this time, and he immediately ordered the 5 armies in Warsaw and the east bank of the Vivas River to retreat to the Bug River. and Tukhachevsky's order was too late at this time, because at this time Seidels was facing the siege of the Polish army, and the defending Soviet army was suffering point attack point after the artillery fire swept over the enemy's position. The Polish officers who led the team immediately waved their hands with their soldiers and rushed towards the fortified fortifications that had been bombarded with holes quick, repel them point. The Soviet army, who had just endured the baptism of artillery, came out of their hiding places in the commander's cry and fired on the enemy, relying on the terrain point between the two lines. Many officers and soldiers who were killed in battle. It can be seen that the two have been fighting for a long time in this position point. This time, the Polish army's attack was different from the previous one. Instead of using natural bunkers to shoot against the Soviet and Russian troops, they endured casualties and rushed directly to them point. Let the Polish army use this deadly play for the simple reason that they are running out of time. As General Zelegovsky reported that the Soviet and Polish forces near Warsaw had stopped their offensive and were preparing to retreat. The Polish army defending Warsaw was unable to hold the opponent down because of the large casualties. Therefore, Piłsudski lacks time now and can only use this quick acting but high casualty play first point, and the deadly play of the Polish army really paid off. The Polish army, which suffered huge casualties, rushed to the position and entangled with the Soviet Russian soldiers, and the tragic hand-to-hand battle broke out like this. Observing from the top of the battlefield, it can be found that even if the Polish army rushed into the position with casualties, its strength was several times that of the defender. So the result is already very obvious. If the Soviet Russian army does not have reinforcement, they will undoubtedly lose. However, with the Polish army occupying several times the advantage, how could the Soviet Russian defenders mobilize reinforcement? So the final result was that the Soviet Russian defenders retreated point. The Polish army did not care about rest at all, and after leaving part of the army to defend it, rushed to the next location. They had limited time and had to capture Seidels as soon as possible to prevent the Soviet troops near Warsaw from escaping. And this is just a corner of the Polish army in Seidels. In other areas, the Polish army, which was desperately defending the Soviet army everywhere, was miserable, and many positions were captured in this way. Point in the headquarters, the commander of the city defense, Sedgev, is being overwhelmed by the offensive of the Polish army. Point report: Betrayal Street has been captured by the enemy, and the defending 9th Battalion soldiers have retreated to the adjacent Edel Street. Point: let the retreating troops retreat to the Larmor Bridge for temporary repair. In addition, the 6th Battalion of Larmor Bridge will be sent reinforcement to reinforce Edel Street and Dole Street, which will become the next focus of the enemy's attack point. While listening to the report of the staff officer, Zhiev issued an order. Now that all the troops in his hand have been sent out, he can only use the defeated soldiers to supplement the troops in the defensive positions. Of course, he also knows that the defeated soldiers need a certain amount of time to recover, so he can only draw points from the positions that have not been attacked. Infantry supplements other areas, but he didn't know how long such a fight would last. Because of the pressure in the soldiers' hearts, they may not be able to withstand the outbreak at any time. However, the strict order from Minsk was that he could not retreat, so he could only defend until the last moment. Point. But when he was worried about defense, a staff officer hurried in. Point report: Darrell Avenue has fallen. Point hearing this news, Zhijev's complexion turned pale, and he immediately grabbed the staff officer and shouted, "Didn't I send 2 battalions to sell this location? How could it fall so quickly?" Point: the location of Dole Street is too important, and it is the main point connecting the east and west of Seidels. As long as the enemy occupies this place, they will be able to cut the shader into 2 disconnected parts. It's also the terrain that gives Seidels this strange urban distribution. In the east of the city there is a tributary of the Wigow River, Berg River, and in the west of the city there are continuous hills, making this the narrowest and narrowest terrain in the city of Seidels. Dole Avenue is the main road of this long and narrow area, so if it is lost here, it can easily be cut on both sides. It is now ordered that 2 companies will be transferred from Ralph's troops, 2 companies will be transferred from the built area, and the guard company of the headquarters will also be transferred, so that they and the 2 battalions that have retreated must retake Dole Street. Following Seidel's order, nearly a regiment of Soviet Russian troops was assembled. And on Daryl Street, there is already a regiment of Polish troops defending here. Because of this critical point, the two sides immediately broke out into a fight point rush over and retake our position point. There was no artillery support at all, and the Soviet soldiers rushed to the position under the leadership of the commander. But what they didn't know was that the attacking corps under the command of Piłsudski was defending here. These troops, composed of the most elite Polish soldiers, did not wait for the enemy to attack at all, but rushed directly to the attacking Soviet troops. In the face of the unreasonable play of the Polish army, the Soviet army suffered a bitter rift point. The Polish army has the confidence to dare to do this. The Polish soldiers in the 1st Company all used MP-18 submachine guns. This kind of close-range killing weapon, which was born not long ago, drove the leading Soviet troops into the air, and then the close-range killing broke out like this on such a battlefield. The MP-18 is simply invincible. The continuous output made the Soviet soldiers completely invincible, and they were defeated and retreated. The Polish army was not polite and took the opportunity to drive the Soviet army to advance in depth. So with the help of the defeated soldiers, many battlefields were taken away by the Polish army effortless point. The Sed's defenders were on the verge of collapse. Of course, Piłsudski would not miss this opportunity and immediately put all the troops into the battlefield. In the end, the Soviet army lost and retreated to Sedel's Point. Now that the two armies of Luobo have achieved the goal of the first stage, they will continue to expand the results and strive to keep more Soviet troops in Poland. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.